ALGS, the Split One playoffs have begun.
It's time. The best crowd in esports. Make some noise. They're running on me. One minute and we get ready for game number one.
Look at the bodies. It's a graveyard down here.
Can he get the double? Yes, he does. Going for the triple kill to kick off the ALGS playoffs in London.
He's going to be hitting some big
Oh
shots.
my goodness, the damage.
The Bravers are finally landing.
Guard is going to win this game.
Ascend will pick up the win.
Oh, he was like, he punched him.
Are you kidding?
He's on main. It should work out. Peekaboo. Let's go with the Kramer. He's going to go in and finish off the damage as well.
Setting a world record.
23 kills. $1 million is on the line today. It is a shootout. I'm going to move forward to become the champions here in London.
You want the money?
You get the damage here. It comes. TSM up in the skies. House goes down from the heavens. London belongs to TSM.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Apex Legends Global Series. It's preseason qualifiers time, but this time it is week number 2. We have one more team looking to seal themselves a ticket into Pro League come next year. But I'm Spider Tiff, and joined alongside me is Zephyr, who I hope you're gonna kick things off and bless us with your beautiful voice this morning and not be muted this time.
I hate you. There's no
It's fine. I had
reason.
to. I
How
had to.
dare you? I swear, I go from Dia to you, and all I get is bullying left and right. I feel like the most bullied man alive, and that's okay. We all need punching bags.
Okay, yeah, that's true. I guess we all do. Definitely, for sure, for me. But anyways, welcome back. This is Emea. It's kind of where we started, right? You and me here and watching our next round of rosters of players that get to fight things out for that chance at Pro League. But if you're new here, if you're just checking out, we are going to be doing the Emea region this morning. Let's go ahead and jump into that year 4 overview of what the whole entire thing of Apex Legends Global Series is going to look like. You can see over in that left-hand diamond, the preseason qualifiers, November to December 2023. That's where we are. There will be 4 of them, which means after today for Emea, we're kind of halfway done, Zephyr.
That's right. This is going to be the breaking point for a lot of these teams who haven't been at least present in our first preseason qualifier, and scarier enough, aren't here today to elicit those extra points, even if they don't walk away with a win. So things are starting to get dire, albeit there is still time left on the clock. We haven't hit 4 just yet.
Hey, that is very true. Let's go ahead and look at the overview of the preseason qualifier finals number 2. We do have 20 teams that have battled out throughout the past few days that will be coming down to one final 6-game series. And friendly reminder, only the first team at the top of the leaderboard today has that guaranteed ticket to Pro League. The rest will come through kind of by luck and sheer points, shall I say, because the teams will earn those points through eliminations and placement. We were kind of talking about that this morning, Zephyr. How many teams are so close in points right now?
That's right, and we'll get to that a little bit later on as we check out some of these teams. But first, let's see exactly how those points tend to shape out here in the preseason qualifiers. If you're familiar with the ALGS, it's no different. We haven't cooked up any new strats. We haven't changed the format, and that's the good thing about this. These teams know it. They love it. 12, 9, 7, 5, 4, 1 point per elimination. This is something that teams are more than well acquainted with.
That is very true, and we've seen just how coveted those eliminations can come down and break it. If you throw down a winning game with north of double-digit eliminations, that should throw you at least a good chunk and keep that momentum moving forward, so you can hopefully find yourself at the top of the leaderboard after today. But let's go ahead and look at the maps that we will be kicking things off with today. We are going to be starting on World's Edge for the first 3 maps of the day, so maybe your team's a little more comfortable with that tried and true map and you're like, I can acquire as many points as possible here, and then try to just kind of coast through Storm Point. Yeah, that might be okay. Or maybe Storm Point's your bread and butter, Zephyr.
Maybe that's the opportunity for some of these teams to catch up, put up the points, put up the fight that we sometimes know Storm Point to be the place for these squads. Speaking of them, though, let's take a look at who joins us here today. And if you were watching preseason qualifier number 1, you'll be surprised. It's not much different. Of our 20 teams, 12 are returning here into our second preseason qualifier.
12 are definitely returning, but we do have just a few new faces. And honestly, Zephyr, I would be amiss to not talk about team number 13 today. Can you go ahead and read that one off for me?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll say the name once, but from here on out, I'll be changing up a little bit. Zephyr's E-Kittens represent in the finals Nazetia, Piggy, Mayborn, and you might get to see one of the lovely few, Angie, making her way in potentially to also fill in there as that substitute. One of the few women that we have competing and actually making it to a preseason qualifier this season.
That's actually really huge. Definitely. I know we had Sabs on the desk at some of the lands, and just like seeing her compete throughout as well, it's just been really a joy. So hopefully more can join her there. But LVH, they won semifinals 1 lobby, and that's Liffen, Hanzo, and Vave. So I mean, that is a team that I fully expect to make their way into Pro League. And if it's not by winning a preseason qualifier, they're currently with 1,440 points of those coveted points that are necessary to find yourselves in those 4 remaining spots. But also, we do have a little bit of roster changes. 40% worse, formerly known as Solo Q Goats. There is a name that is missing from this roster. It's going to be Diff Q, but now we have Mandy, Zephyr, and they have been so fun to watch throughout the journey coming into this finals lobby.
Yeah, and for anyone who's questioning, it was amicable. We make just a minor change up here and put Mandy now a little bit in that driver's seat to give him this kind of co-IGL position alongside Shiv that has, I don't know why they put themselves as 40% worse. They're looking 40% better if you had to ask me going into this preseason qualifier. I remind folks at home, they were sitting, I believe, in 16th last week coming out of their first show in finals here. So definitely looking to see if they make that improvement. I will say there is some minor changes as well alongside Stay Healthy. You will notice that AJ and Masuko are still playing for this roster, but last week we're joined by Atnam. Instead, we'll be jumping on with Thawne here. And for those who maybe don't know who Thawne is, this is a fellow that was playing alongside Infinite in the last Split 2 Challenger circuit, placing on that roster first above any other team in the Challenger circuit. So definitely a dangerous third to represent.
Ooh, definitely. I know Red Dragon, they won semifinals lobby 2 just by a few points over Rats, so we could see some good momentum from them as well. Rats obviously has a lot of experience in the competitive scene, so they are wanting to get back into that regular season. But Three Dragons, a team that only made it into the finals lobby by 1 point, so I'm keeping my eyes on them. But overall, this is definitely a room to grow and get as much competitive experience before we kick things into gear the rest of year 4. That'll kick off, come next year.
And you know what? I kind of like that because at the end of the day, when it comes down to things where you say experience and growing, yeah, we've got some of those teams, but there are a lot of familiar faces here who've had the opportunity in the past and now show up once again. Some other big names for folks to watch out, especially with some of our newer rosters that now represent. Calm with Tai Sheen, Habibis with My C here. A team listen, the entirety, Kumbra, Strongest, Plum, used to be playing on 3 Muppets back in Pro League last year, and plenty of others. So it's not just a competitive lobby of our quote-unquote challengers coming up through the preseason qualifiers. It's also a lot of faces that have been here before, been in Pro League before, and host that experience that should put them on a pedestal as we work our way through today's games.
Those are all very strong points, and you would be remiss to not talk about G Dolphin as well. The level of community and all of his experience that he has brought to competitive is always under, it seems to be kind of like a different name, but it's his home is in Apex and competing and just watching his journey. I just want it to all kind of find that synergy, find where he can just kind of excel at with the team. So see what Need More Bullets can do today. But alas, we do have a lot of people out there that are doing watch parties that support the community. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Greek Wig and Hackis who are going to be doing watch parties today. And if you're joining us here on the main broadcast, thank you so much for joining Zephyr and I and the whole Versus team. We are just about to get underway with map number 1 of World's Edge. And I honestly, Zephyr, do you have any picks? I always need to kind of think about this, and I couldn't pick one team in particular to kind of show out above the rest. But if you had to say, I think this team could potentially walk away with a coveted ticket to Pro League, who would that be?
I know it's relatively simple, especially after their performance from last week in second place, but LVH has truly proven to me that if not a current position, they deserve at some point in this PSQ to walk away with a win or at least be in that top four. Liffen and Vaves, obviously, with a massive chunk of pro experience on both rosters like Alliance, E6, and the bunch, but Jay Hanzo especially, a newer name here who hasn't gotten the opportunity to truly shine or really present, say, on the upper level, is showing that he can play just as good and lead teams like LVH into great positions and put them in the, we'll say, driver's seat to potentially win. So I know it's kind of simple. Second place is, I mean, literally the fiddle you would send yourself up and next with on the dancing show here, but it's one of the best rosters and they reappear here. I gotta choose.
We do love a good bit of consistency. Let's see if LVH can get that coveted spot up top. For me, I'm keeping my eyes on 40% worse, right? I was dropped into Mandy's stream yesterday, kind of watching the dynamics between him, Shiv, and Zeri. So I was like, what is going to happen with this roster here? We know Mandy as being that super sub that can just like slot into a roster and keep it functioning, but is this going to be the roster that him and Shiv just excel on? They find full form. I've seen people talk about how Mandy looks like a former self, like actually happy playing comp alongside Shiv, who will be that main IGL, but Mandy is by no doubt making a lot of calls. So that is kind of my biggest question for them, is when you have the potential of calls in too many places, right? You don't want to see any kind of hits of doubt. Just like lock it in, no mistakes, let's have some fun.
And the really cool fun fact about this roster that I enjoy is the fact that they do have Zerifer on it, which maybe to some isn't a person that a lot of people recognize or know, but a former Pro League competitor, and even more important, a player that actually qualified through the preseason qualifiers in year 3. There are not many people out there who can say they actually did that, and notably didn't qualify off of points, qualified off of a win alongside the corporate roster. So maybe if you don't know the name Zerifer now, that's something that will give you that support for that 40% worse roster, as you know that all three are gunning for success.
I really need to know where the 40% worse came from, because
I know.
they're not 40% worse. I mean, these names we were talking about, like, they are getting quite interesting, especially obviously Zephyr's E-Kittens, which I will never say again. I'm gonna have to come up with something different, because the first thing you said to me this morning was meow, and then I knew things were getting out of hand.
You can always say your E-Kittens as we make mention to it.
Yes, Zephyr, your E-Kittens are competing here today. It's okay, so are Habibis and Made in Heaven. We got a little bit of dragon action in here. It's definitely not going to look like Game of Thrones. Speaking of, I think I did see a trailer for House of the Dragon season 2. And
I'm sick of it at this point.
No, don't even.
It's diverged to a point that it's not even relevant.
No, and, it's so good. House of the Dragon's good. We love Targaryens. What do you mean?
Okay.
What do you mean?
All right. Calm down. I'll tell you what, let's pull it back to studio here as we finish up our discussion on some of these rosters. But I know we're on Emea, but I would be curious to say, how was North America last week for preseason qualifiers? And do you see any kind of comparisons between that and what elicits here in Emea yet?
You know, it was fun. I feel like North America was a total brawl. It was very competitive. There were a lot of teams just full sending it. And I feel like that was kind of interesting. Now, granted, we know no days off. They won week 1, so they've already found themselves. So they were extremely kind of aggressive in that sense. So it's who is going to elicit and kind of step up to that role, or we'll see a lot more people alive later in the game. I remember tuning into Emea, and at one point, I believe there's only 4 squads into like that final zone. Whereas in North America, we were going the long haul. There were multiple teams kind of at those end games, just like vying to play that heavy zone. And then obviously it was Elevate who was just completely just like going crazy end game, being very aggressive, fighting from very, very far outside the zone straight in. And congratulations to Zach on the NA team for kind of moving forward alongside others.
And I think it's interesting I bring it up because there is that difference, and something that's going to potentially some impacts on getting it to maybe more of a stabilized position where teams are surviving longer and making these impacts is the fact that we don't see a lot of changes,
Yeah.
right? Teams are adjusting to a very similar lobby, and albeit, yes, there is going to be at least 40% of it that is different. I mean, that is much greater than what we are particularly used to in any form of preseason qualifiers. This is a topic that I was discussing with Jayhawk earlier this week, and it will continue to evolve as we make our way through these next and further weeks. When we talk about preseason qualifiers, personally, I'm not used to seeing these teams continue to exist through and through and through. In last year's last chance qualifiers for champs, there were only one or two teams that had made it all the way through all four opportunities in Challenger Circuit to get the chance to compete there. And it happens with every single Challenger Circuit and every previous iteration of preseason qualifiers. So the big thing I'm watching out for as we subtract some of our winners who are, absolute shows, and this continues to progress, what are the teams that manage to do so? Who continues to represent and find their way to these finals here where they put up the lion's share of those points that should put them in Pro League? Potentially for North America, that's going to be something that nets you an absolute position in Pro League. But at least from Emea, what I'm seeing right now is the fact that just getting to finals maybe isn't potentially enough anymore. In the past, you used to be a team that could get there as 3 or 4 and make your way directly into Pro League just simply because you happen to get to finals every time. If we continue to see double-digit numbers show up every single week, it doesn't come down just to your presence. It does finally come down to your performance.
It's the performance, it's the consistency, it's things that we always seek upon. We want to know that that's happening. And for teams now 40% worse, solo queue goats last week, right? They're pretty far outside the top 10 in terms of points, maybe closer to 15th and 16th, but that's not going to get you in that top 4 points should you not win a week. And you look at the 2nd through 5th, I mean, there's only 90 points separating LVH from the boys. So and that's kind of your threshold of should they not win any and carry on and keep getting consistent amount of points, that's kind of who will be in those slotted 4 spots that other teams are vying for. And you said it, double digits remaining after week. And this is where you've got to lock it in. Week number 2, let's get it in. Get that first place so you can get your ticket to Pro League today as we throw up character select.
We'll take a look here and see if there's anything shifty or sniffy out here in any comp potentially lists itself as a unique thing to behold here. I'm already starting to see a Wraith for Bacalao there. That was something they pulled out of their pack last week on Sens, but the majority of teams still working around that Catalyst, Bangalore Horizon, and the Conduit, which has made itself more of a reliable fixture.
Yeah, Conduit's been really interesting. I know Dia and I sat down prior to kind of her launch and we're talking about how this could potentially shake up the competitive nature and how many teams would actually elicit that Conduit pick. But not that many people have been going ahead and picking Conduit. And I completely
Mm.
understand that. But I've also seen people allude to Conduit as kind of a pocket mercy per se when it comes to pushing into fights. You just have that uh, easy access to replenish those shields with the Radiant transfer. And it is a very scary thing to fight about, but it also is so coveted when you have to reset after an engagement, knowing there's another team down your back.
Yeah, it's something that will give teams potentially that confidence, that extra boost that they need to take these 3v3s, I would say, more reliably, right, when they begin to fight things out here. But as our dropship makes its way through for the first time, the thing I'm most curious about is, albeit there is a, we'll say, relative sense of familiarity, there are some teams that are new. Notably, my E-Kittens are here and competing in Tree, and hopefully they make it further today.
Further, do you think the name change was everything that they needed? We have Zephyr's IGL E-Kitten, Zephyr's another E-Kitten, and then Zephyr's Fragger E-Kitten. I could only imagine just how excited these 3 are to represent Zephyr with all pride as we are here in the Tree. Kind of, obviously we have another team in the back buildings and they're very aware, but the IGL E-Kitten definitely takes a significant amount of damage before that Radiant transfer comes through. And yes, I am going to really love saying this.
I'm getting a kick out of it. It is the best here, and we'll tune in later, see if they manage to survive. The team though that we jump over to is none other than McDudes here on the height that have now taken this position out from tree. The E-Kittens are in good response, but damage back down on Luxor, but being pushed this far into the corner doesn't elicit a lot of success here. McDude on the blue in the best position currently, as they are able to find the break onto Bangalore with that crack, and are confirmed to at least found one already for these E-Kittens. They might have to find their way back to the litter box here as Orkern is down. McDude gonna take the time to heal up.
McDude, notoriously from McDudes, will fall to the anchor, who I had previously read as another, which means I'm also blind. So let's see if the Luxor, the last member of the McDudes, can show up against the anchor on Conduit. Obviously does have the Radiant transfer available should they not decide to sell up, but it looks like they're just going to let the IGL make some calls, let them know when the push is going to happen, and essentially full heal from here.
I worry about a little bit of the potential to revive here on the opposite side for McDudes. The E-Kittens going to take the opportunity to pull this one back together, as I assume this is Nazetia, as the IGL is pulled back alive here. And as a result, it is going to be responded in tow, with the McDudes doing so as well here. So very unlikely that they're going to be able to pick up that banner in full force. Instead, it's going to potentially come back to the fact that they need to look for a crafter, especially with something like this Conduit online, and go for a full revive in that sense. Still though, not completely wiped out, even though the McDudes are continuing to chase here.
Yeah, and this is really unfortunate for McDudes, right? Because they haven't really had a good chunk of time to loot up before Forbidden Gaming has actually decided to rotate in from the launch site side. They've occupied the buildings that McDudes originally had, and you can see McDude just falling so quickly to that 30-30 and now relegated to that duo. So let's see that Forbidden Gaming push, and they're sitting on triple blues. They have bats. They have everything that they need, knowing that they were able to loot with ease, uncontested, and now want to third-party this.
And this is something taking completely on the outside of our zone towards the south here. No one in an actual position to elicit game control. So as a result, I mean, there's not much to particularly lose if you're already playing within this area. For Forbidden, it's at least the one pickup. But seeing now the presence of many teams out here towards the west of Geyser begins to show me a little bit of where this might be pulling. Before we jumped over here, it was Vase struggling on LVH, getting knocked down alongside teams here like Passion, who are controlling this area. I don't know if they're going to have the opportunity to pull it back together, but it is still incredibly early.
Definitely still very early. We only have one team that has fallen. I believe that was 202 early on from that Lava Fisher engagement, as it looks as if the E-Kitten Zephyr, they're running into a little bit of trouble kind of on that rotation, but alas, with the Wraith portal coming in here, should be able to reposition themselves quite nicely, but they're dancing in between the buildings, trying to decide where do we kind of want our nice lay of the land. Not a bad building, you can fence it up easily. You've got the pylon down, and LVH have elected to kind of barricade themselves on the lower half.
This is back up here for LVH, and the revive of health coming through as well alongside that Conduit. This is a position that when we talk about the western side of this kind of no-name Geyser outside of the Mirage Etoile is something that does allow for a lot of survivability among multiple teams here, but surprisingly, LVH has got a squad on top who had opted to take second floor, and it is nothing less than easy for Liffin to pop a drop down onto Sens there. Now with that Rolling Thunder out and deleted, they can't quite close the distance to go for the full wipe with teams pressuring out here from east, but they are going to look for it. There's that pylon down.
Hanzo, that was a very eloquent push there, able to get a nice shield crack, but they just cannot commit to this, not with the team breathing down the 30-30s, the longbows. That is allowing them to put pressure onto this and making this push just a little bit more difficult than it kind of needs to be. And then you look to the right, you've got Kumbra, Plume, and Strongest just kind of waiting, vying for that chance, knowing the moment they see some knocks maybe go down in that kill feed, that'll give them the signal of saying, hey, you know, maybe we should approach this engagement.
With double gold, too, it's the perfect opportunity to go for a quick fight and actually be confident in the fact that you know you have quick reset. For Bacalao here, Sens and Esk, even though they are back up and in it, are still on double white here, and that's information that LVH do have. Big problem is that I'm pretty sure they're confidently not going to assume any more aggressive positioning on top of them. Just as I say that they've already made for the push here, the fence line not really finding any kind of response in terms of pressuring them back. LVH are just happy to find cracks and slowly foot their way forward, playing off of Lip and Smoke there to give them that option. Still though, no knocks, no drops. The fight continues on.
Just depleting resources, even with LVH having the upper hand on the shields. But there's something to be said about a really talented Watson player. When you start navigating those fences, you can essentially sit in it. And if LVH decides to push up, all the Watson player does is just move off the fence and that instant stun enacts. But let's go ahead. We've got the map up here. Exclamation point map should be a feed in chat if you'd also like to keep up. But this is a good call, Zephyr, for a lot of our teams that are seeking to occupy some of the main buildings should this push. But I don't believe that I saw a team take Mirage yet, which means it's not pulling there.
Not potentially, I will say. Sometimes
Hopefully.
you can see that cater over towards that eastern side, but the teams know better than I do. For 40% worse, though, up towards the northern side, a team that we are watching. They haven't made their way directly in yet, and something like that Mirage is a good opportunity for them to play from height, even if it isn't potentially the pull that we'll see here for this game. Still though, lots of teams still well and outside this zone as we pull back over to Myth. They are chasing down the remnants here of, I believe, that Forbidden roster. And for them, already with the pickup on one, they've got to be careful how they foot their way into staging. This is the point where we do see a lot of teams stacked up and ready to eclipse you as you make your way into zone.
It wouldn't be a bad rotation through here. They can kind of hit the crafter, maybe grab some materials. They do have 4 bats in the hand of Reaper, but what is just a few more? They do have the evac tower available should they just decide to skirt through the air across, but finding a place to land is going to be quite challenging with 19 teams still up, and these choke points, these rotational aspects are going to be incredibly tough. You got Babylon, Clemmy. Over to the left side, that Forbidden Gaming roster you mentioned, hey, they ran into some difficulties earlier, but they seem to be all well, and that 30-30 is such a dangerous weapon to be had.
It feels like we're back in the wingman meta, albeit just a slightly different gun. I say slightly because it feels almost identical outside of the general ADSing movement here. For Forbidden, they take perfect advantage, find early damage down, and of course are dropping that energy barricade, but are of course dissuaded. With a Rolling Thunder, they can't quite cross that space, and that's an ultimate that I don't think will get much utilization there. In turn, it's still a hold on choke. The boys are going to start moving up and looking for better angles here, as that you might see them kind of rotate or towards this northern side with the blue bins and try to wrap, get ahead on this choke here, and put pressure down before they get the opportunity to play from this alone. Big thing, though, to note is that they've got time. Round 2 close into round 3 is still a playable position, but Clemmy's got to be careful here. Sniped out from afar, it is none other than Tai Sheen who finds the first move.
And that is going to make things a little bit difficult. Clemmy on the conduit. No Radiant transfer will be available or expended throughout. So but the gold knock will make things different. Make sure they prioritize that res. They know they have Taijin at the back of Forbidden Gaming. Also adding a little bit of challenge. Able to grab a knock onto Aku. So that's 2 members of Forbidden Gaming left standing. Radiant transfer coming through. And Babylon's just like that back into the fight. They can hit that thirst. Or armor swap will be available, but this is what you have to worry about. Taisheen on the high ground outside of the choke. So no matter how this engagement goes, Zephyr, Taisheen's waiting.
This is the position that I was most worried about for either one of these teams. The boys are currently in the lead, and granted, they've got a lot of time to make this work here, but this push ahead of them is going to be incredibly difficult. Now, though, closing the side here, they're completely safe undercover. Bacco with that first knock onto Zodiac, and it leaves just one here. I mean, trying to play for the pill, trying to play through the dark veil. Forbidden Gaming are left within the dust.
I love that Tapraxi and Bucky was kind of able to extend out with Taishin overlooking them, trying to maybe potentially grab a KP or 2, but this would make no sense for them to extend into the choke to try and third party this engagement, especially knowing that Clemmy on the conduit would be able to hit that Radiant transfer despite all the armor swaps available to them. Now sitting on red and some purples, they just need to think of their next move as they navigate out of that choke point, right? You can see on the map screen, the boys kind of down to that further checkpoint on that western side, but it's 40% worse that are navigating the coastline just across from Mirage Voyage. But your E-Kittens and Rats, they're kind of getting into a little tussle here soon, making their way through staging.
It'll be very tough for McDudes, Rats, E-Kittens to make their way in past staging here, as a lot of the really good advantageous height has been picked up, notably by Made in Heaven and, I believe, Stay Healthy here. For my E-Kittens, they will face their end as early as 18th, and that's good, especially for a team like the Rats, who, in their first position of finals last week, finished in 18th overall. So already starting with some good KP here and looking for potentially more, as they'll be able to put just outside of staging here towards the west. They've got to be really careful of how that height plays into control here. A lot of teams holding this train line should have good optimal angles, and really crossing this distance, especially with teams underneath, will be a challenge.
Definitely will. Let me see. Art from the Habibis here with a rock, and we're going to pop that Bloodhound ultimate and try to push forward. Just a few bullets would be needed to grab that knock, but unfortunately you get poked and prodded and forced to reassess, reposition, just looking for any kind of opening that would allow them to inch their way forward. Just one more shot here, Art. We need it, but you already have 2 eliminations before getting traded out. When you've got bullets flying from your right and in front of you, Habibis have found themselves in a rather precarious situation.
3 Dragons over there towards that western side, taking advantage of that aggressive position. Will find Art eliminated there, and TTX will take the time to get a little bit of the recovery off of that initial shield swap, but is also quickly popped out here. On the other side, we've got another Dragons here. Our friends from Westeros have come to sing, and they will send the Habibis home in 17th. For the Dragons, though, it's still a far distance for them to fly before they can find their roost here within the circle. One that is notably heavily contested, especially from this northern edge here. Passion and 40% worse, contesting both the Mirage there. Linkster G-Dolphin from Need More Bullets down below. And we do have Kazakh's roster, at least there over on the side. I do like the Blue Moon start for players, but it will need a transition here in a little bit.
Yeah, and as you see, that ring pulling just to the complete other side of Mirage Voyage. So some of the teams that may have elected to play high ground early on to look for third parties or easy KP, they're going to have a little bit of a tough time. Now, granted, if you can navigate the top, sure, you can play for just a little bit longer at the front of that. But the moment you have to jump down, that is going to leave you so vulnerable to the teams that have been occupying those houses since the very beginning. Team Listen, LVH, they will have to move. There is one building just south of them, but it's going to be Myth Esports that has called this to perfection. Now, granted, can they elicit and hold this just a little bit longer? Still 16 squads left, but the boys who currently in the top 5 for preseason qualifier points, they're doing pretty good today.
Yeah. Now, something interesting, though, to note is that, I mean, with this rotation from the boys, this is a thorn in your side here. They're going to look to close this gap, but they have to deal with Calm first. For Need More Bullets, though, we see Linkster drop down that Dark Veil, and it's going to be the slow crawl up towards, I believe, the player's space over on the side. For Myth, though, and them, competing against the likes of Stay Healthy is something that they have to settle before they take this height in its lonesome. And Stay Healthy, well, they're making good on the name, staying as healthy as can be. Thon with that full recovery, and now with just that Dark Veil being the only closing gap, I believe Myth is forced to go back to height here, unable to finish the job in which they start. Still, though, they are trying to peek over the side. Thon will fall low again. A Dark Veil pulled out in return here. That's going to fall in just a second. They've got to be careful which side they present on.
Calm has fallen, Rats has fallen, but Stay Healthy with the new addition for the week, Thon, doing everything that they can to take out Myth in the wake. McDudes, there is a lone solo left alive, but still 14 squads remaining, and rather, I was very curious if Myth Esports could hold this position for long. We've seen a lot of teams try to play the underneath of this bridge and on top, and it has never ended in a win that I have witnessed or cast over, and I'm sure there is somewhere out there, but like I haven't cast over it, so I've only seen chaos.
Let's see how chaos ensues. Notably, though, the Dragons making a great rotation here. Last time we had checked in with them, they were playing the northern side, and I was expecting them maybe to put pressure down and find their way towards over the player side. Instead, they had free rotation, especially with Myth getting involved here on the low ground, that allowed them to make this cross confidently, come down from the north, take the train line, and now take a dominant high ground position. This is a spot that teams usually win this circle from, and it was given up basically for free here. The only question, though, still yet remains, there are a lot of teams on this low ground. They're going to make their rise, stay healthy being one of them, something that can be incredibly punishing.
3 Dragons has fallen. We're down to the final 10 of the first here as Need More Bullets trying to use that evac tower to rotate throughout, but they're going to lose out on Tryhard Thor. G Dolphin within just mere flesh from staying alive. Linkster is going to drop down and try to reunite with him, but when you've got Passion ahead of you, it could be quite tantalizing to try to get back on your feet. Regardless, G Dolphin likely expending the Rolling Thunder to try and pull some attention away from them, but it's just not going to be enough. Still prioritizing healing, and it's going to be Vibes from LVH who is able to get that final elim onto Thor.
LVH surprisingly still left alive here. That building has given them so much time to contest, and looking inside the cart, this is usually a death trap for any team, but Jay Hanzo gets a little too confident on that swing and puts LVH now in a 2v2 situation. Hop over on the edge. Will be an Ordnance finding a bit of damage on the fence line, but with that wall down here, the recovery on Jay Hanzo feels almost impossible, especially with teams sitting below here. LVH are going to try to play as 2.
G Dolphin down here still vying for his life, able to take down a few members of Passion. And now Vibes last standing. Here's the deal about the Radiant transfer, though. You have to be without taking damage for 2 seconds before that will enact. So when you are making those tough pushes against those RVs just above, it's going to take a second before that can kick in. Passion, Team Listen has fallen, and Need More Bullets, though. They are looking relatively healthy as a duo, despite the witness that we just saw from them.
I can't believe that. And G-Dolphin then will find that minor recovery. Still, though, I look at this here from Red Dragon. Prestis, Go, Plushka are in a perfect position as we say goodbye to players here. The only question that I have is, can Red Dragon put enough damage down, enough pressure on these teams that no one gets the opportunity to slide up? And even if they do as a full 3-man force, they are as weak as can be. A big push on top of the likes of Need More Bullets here is going to be rectified, but from above, the drop from Vapes saves the day for LVH.
And just trying to tuck in as far as you can right there, knowing the ring is at your back. Slowly, you're going to have to inch further into that final circle. But Red Dragon having the ultimate high ground, electing to utilize Grablet. This is why Horizon is so viable for that topography that makes you get to the top, right? And they just go down, eliminate a team, and then return right back up for as long as they can land. And they're going to play and drop down. This is absolutely disgusting for Red Dragon here.
It's tough, though. They're about to lose out on this space, and the only defensive option they really have is, pushing for the 1v1 potential, especially alongside something like that Revenant. But they know they've got corners to work with. But the team that pressures is no longer there. They've opted to play down for the low ground with that zone closing in, and now Red Dragon are the only team on top. 4 squads left alive. I'm 100% sure all left standing below here.
Your winners from semi-finals lobby 2 have 2 on the low ground, and Red Dragon are just essentially going to wait. They get a free win on this, and Plushka's gonna drop down, try to clean things up, make sure they get any kind of KP. But that is, dare I say, Zephyr, the freest win for them because they played that so impressively, knowing where they needed to hold the zone, knowing where they needed to lie in wait and apply the pressure when needed, and that was just impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it is textbook right there. They were gifted a perfect zone off of a bit of some shakeup between Maiden Heaven, Myth, and Stay Healthy. As a result, spying that weakness, or more importantly, that wide open door, give them the opportunity to cross, play from that height, and then as we get into that late game, they do a remarkably excellent job of pressuring any and every team away from height. Everyone else kind of makes the decision. I guess we're playing for second here, and Red Dragon get the perfect opportunity to walk away with Game 1's win.
Yeah, and I don't want to like cast a curse or anything, but I would like to once again say that I still have not cast a game where someone plays from the underside of the bridge and takes the win. Rather unfortunate. I would love to see it happen at some point in time because if you think about it, right, you end that engagement early there before Myth had kind of fallen. And had you taken to the high ground, the issue with that high grounds effort, and I know you're going to agree with me here, is if you take that position just even maybe a couple teams fallen just earlier, you would notice that that's unplayable because everyone's going to look at you. Everyone's going to take that 30-30 and point it right in your direction, and then it's unplayable.
And that's why teams like to position themselves over towards the Dorito building or some of those other geyser based buildings because they are utilized as a transition point to give yourself the confidence to play from that height. But with that major success, we'll see what heights have now been achieved for the likes of Red Dragon. Let's take a look at those standings and see where they position themselves on the board.
You know, I'm kind of ready to see it. After that 12 points alone from taking the win, they coupled it with 13 eliminations for 25 points alone in map number 1. But stay healthy, taking home 14 points, need more bullets. Hey, as a duo, towards the end of that, able to grab 9 alongside Bacalao and LVH
Jeez.
with 9 and 8. Overall, relatively consistent between the 3rd through 9th place teams. This could be really interesting today's effort.
But Red Dragon are heavily in the lead in comparison here. A very top heavy lobby alongside them. And surprisingly, Stay Healthy, who albeit weren't in the position to take that height, still managed to survive all the way to the end there and at least walk away with 14. We're going to take a look, though, as we make our way into Game 2. There are still plenty of opportunities for these teams to put up the points that count. You guys over at home, take a break, grab some snacks, and when we come back, we'll reintroduce World's Edge one more time.
Welcome back to the Apex Legends Global Series Week 2 preseason qualifiers. I'm SpiderTip, that's Zephyr, and no, he's actually not competing today despite one of the team's names. We did get confirmation on the Anchor and IGL and all the different Zephyrs E-Kittens were today, but it was not them that took the win in map number 1. It's actually going to be Red Dragon after a commanding lead there, Zephyr.
And it's nice to see, especially after last week, where they did struggle alongside Three Dragons, both two dominant teams in their semifinals, to actually position themselves upon the top here. Let's take a look at those standings once more before we get into it, as the lead is good, but they need to maintain it.
Definitely, definitely. But, 11 points is that differential between first and second place, which when you look at it, you might think that's amazing after game number 1, but you've got to keep the consistency. I know Red Dragon, and coming from that semifinals 2 lobby just a few short hours ago, maybe yesterday, they had 2 commanding wins in their semifinals bout and were able to remain relatively consistent throughout the other 4 games, which kind of got them to the top. Can they do it here in the finals lobby when a lot of things kind of shake up? Things are a little more different. And I will say that Mirage Zone kind of pulling out towards that rock was a really interesting map number 1 to kick things off here in the finals.
Yeah, I think in terms of kind of what you're trying to say there, especially, is the fact that even though we do have a lot of decisive zones in Apex Legends, I mean, there's a lot of playable opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And even if you are a team who is positioned in that 3rd or 4th spot, you have the option to potentially outplay a lot of these other rosters to potentially win that game. And I hate to say it, but positioning like that, especially for Red Dragon that game, is so utterly dominant that it was guaranteed that they were walking away with first here. So the hope is, as we go back to World's Edge, we look at a map, we look at a zone that gives these teams the opportunity to play out their best in the way that they know they can.
Ooh, well, if we're going to go for that, I want a climatizer ending. I know when I first started in Pro League and Split 1, I know, look, this is disgusting, right? The first 3 maps that Vicky and I ever had to commentate together on World's Edge, they all pulled Northeastern, almost the exact thing, and we were just going climatizer back to back to back. So I want to manifest that because there's so many teams that can play inside of climatizer and the surrounding areas, and I just feel like that would just be very interesting for my lovely Monday.
Hey, as long as we aren't going Skyhook, I'm happy with any zone, all right? I'm a Skyhook hater, I suppose.
Ooh,
Which,
don't be that.
no, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it gets a little boring. You get like 15 to 16 teams that end up there. They all play through zone 4 and 5, and then it pulls towards one side, and then you just get
Wait,
to
did
see
you
this
not see the
massive
NA
winners.
ending then? Did you not see that one?
No.
It was atrocious. Half of it was pure mountain, and it was elevate from the outside of the building that was just playing a fence line. It was,
Really?
it was definitely a bloodbath.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I'm all for the blood. Maybe not the bath part of that, but we'll see it as it comes here, especially as we might get the opportunity to pop back up there. But for these teams here, the place that I'm most curious about is not just Tree, but also Lava Fisher. Last time around, we saw 202 in many of these squads compete here, and 202 especially is a team that we haven't given a lot of attention today, especially because of this early start here. Already scanned out and already facing damage. Ozzy Owl will look for the initial advantage. Notably, no gun picked up by this Horizon. A follow through on the grab lift will find TTX down.
Yo, let me tell you, an alternator off rip is probably one of my favorite guns to land on if I'm not going to get something that is like a flatline or anything crazy like that. But 202 looking much different compared to map number 1. They've already got 1 member down and a shield crack on the Bloodhound to the left. They just need to cover the distance. Miss Cam here with the PK. Not a bad weapon off drop, but needs to get a good line of sight, maybe an angle as they approach ever so slowly, but an L-star off drop, ooh, that can change things. Ozzy Owl is falling, now hitting for flesh. Radiant transfer coming through, able to grab the second one. We know the final member is going to be Missy and definitely needs to be found out.
Oh no, and already spotted here on the low ground. Micey is down to just a single digit of health as it is currently sustained. Ozzy Owl is pulled back into it to give the full force of 3, but Micey doesn't even look for a full escape here. And you know they can hear the syringe, they can hear the cell. A quick peek in for the Habibis. They are sadly out in 20th.
Unlucky, but This gives 202 the standing start that they needed and 3 KPs to turn their tides. Let's go ahead and pull up that map to see where we will be heading. And no, it will not be Climatizer. You mentioned Skyhook, and this is going to be a rather interesting zone because so much of Skyhook is still involved. You can see there is a ping going out that's very similar to where that zone in NA last week ended, is that yellow ping on the map. Now, could it pull there? There's a good chance, but this setup does look a little bit different than the first initial rings that we had witnessed for that ending.
It is a challenge over there, and something that usually kind of positions itself just either outside of that tower, or more notably the sniper tower over towards the east, where we see one team play from that height, and then the surrounding buildings elicit a lot of the support and survivability here. Many of our teams, though, surviving much longer this time around. My E-Kittens are still alive and well, as they will make their way into Fragment, and the same can be said for Bacalao here, as they will be making their way over and across the Fragment area here. Most of these teams kind of moving quite fast to try to close the distances between their edge positions and where they want to be within this zone.
Definitely, you can see Bacalao here making their way over to the ring console, wanting to maybe feel a little bit more certain, get that extra information. Very typical. You'll always see the Bangalore smoke kind of covering while they hit that scan, but interesting enough, the Wraith play. We did not see any Wraiths in North America, and I will say there's a ton of more Revenants than I have ever seen in North America for preseason qualifiers thus far.
Yeah, it is unusual, and it'll be something that apparently doesn't find its mark, as a sniper's mark is the drop here. Apparently, my E-Kittens with a Vantage in play. Plushka's going to be stuck on that revive here, as Prestis is on the controlling end of things with that Hemi, and will find some damage that presents. Rats, though, coming into the fray of this fight will stop the Kittens from getting their full impact in on this fight, as they take down one and force the rest of this team down below into the trenches here. It was a good starting knock, but not a lot of respect paid towards the back end, and kind of really understanding that you've got these teams still rotating, still looking.
Yeah, your Kittens are looking a little worse for wear. I'm not gonna lie, sitting on 2 whites as they kind of make their way out, with Mayborn having gone down already and being fully thirsted. The Rats have been able to kind of occupy that space in No Name, and they usually vie for the beacon and the information that are available to them in that kind of No Name POI. But the Kittens have found themselves a little bit of a shelter underneath. They kind of want to go back and get a hold of Mayborn if they can. That Vantage would be so nice to have, but we'll have to wait and see, as a lot of our teams have made their way already into Skyhook. Of course, there's going to be a team at the top of that center building in the middle. That's always one of the first places to go, but it's going to be Passion, 40% worse, and LVH kind of occupying these center buildings here. Now, they are getting a little bit closer to where that NA zone ended, but for Forbidden Gaming, Zephyr, having a little bit of trouble here in Thermal.
All the way down south here, where things are heating up. Forbidden will take the opportunity to go for the full battle on the opposite side, as a quick beamage from Aku is found with the R99 here. Zeus falling up, and from behind they form the trifecta of bullets here to send Taishin down. I'll leave one member left standing on the outside here for Calm to potentially survive, as could be on that height or could be running for the hills. For Forbidden, though, it is still 2 KP on the board.
And Red Dragon making their way, vying from quite far out of Skyhook. Zephyr's E-Kittens hyper aware of the team rotating and not necessarily going to push, so smart, right? We've got to craft the banner, get Mayborn back into this lobby, which is also one of my favorite things about Conduit, which I don't know if she should have necessarily been a support legend. Like, I completely understand it, but you get to craft banners thanks to Conduit.
Hey, I think in terms of support legends, it's a very minor detail that does find its success occasionally here. And Conduit being a more battle medic is something that kind of finally puts that on its pedestal here. We'll see teams contesting just on the outskirts of the crafter. For Babylon, it's barely a contest there. Through the smoke, Clemmy will find once more. And for Myth, they're pretty much almost completely eliminated here. Chase potentially ensue.
Calm has fallen, and now the boys have a good bit of space here as they're quite far out, but Myth Esports will likely fall here, but just wrapping up, trying to loot for the former. But this is going to make them incredibly late to Skyhook. And anytime that end game starts to pull into Skyhook, you have to start thinking about the choke points, the rotation, the aspects, the buildings, and the priority spots that will already be taken as Reaper is trying to dodge all the longbow shots coming their way, the Radiant transfer coming through, but rather unfortunate. You just got to get behind a rock so you can start redeeming that, which is kind of interesting because I was always curious. I don't usually... It doesn't really work outside of the ring, huh? Would you look at that?
Well, taking damage there,
Yeah.
punished out, especially, and for Reaper, it's going to be a tough rotation for them right now. As from the majority of these teams, though, that we're currently looking at, a happy position, especially as we get to check out and see that this is dominantly a Skyhook zone here, whether it be in front of the Spire itself or out over towards the east. Most of our teams are already well within presence, only counting roughly 8 or 9 who haven't quite made their way in. But Tiff, when it comes down to it, Skyhook is one of those zones that even if you don't get priority position, you will get a position, whether it be contesting and sharing the same building or potentially one of those outskirt opportunities. It's going to shove a lot of these teams into spots that, you know, more confidently they have the opportunity to work with. And while they may not be dominantly there for that end game, they have the choices that would even punish some of these other teams who are usually in safer position to contest.
Yeah, then immediately when I'm looking this, I see Red Dragon occupying that building just on the outskirts of that choke point. A lot of teams like to hold here, look for any kind of engagements that they can get on teams that are rotating through. Now, Rats, should they decide to either take kind of the tunnel into Skyhook or kind of navigate towards where they are sitting, that will be really interesting to see how Red Dragons attach that. But for the teams that are going to be rotating in for maybe more of that countdown side, I think that could be a more fair choice from them because it's not too far to go to get into that zone.
No, and yeah, I think coming through on the edge there is definitely something that can work. You just have to worry about a lot of the controlled space there that we saw already from teams like Need More Bullets, but even as we pull out here between players, McDudes, and others who are contesting this eastern side here. So most of these teams probably going to start to lull this out. I'm most curious about our edge rotators, the Rats potentially poised to take away Myth here, and of course the E-Kittens on their way in, likely to struggle. The boys, though, albeit on the edge, this is a team that dominantly likes to play from the edge. If you remember them from last year, as from nowhere, they optimally played with that lifeline, and that style on edge gave them the opportunity to qualify in the preseason qualifiers of year 3.
McDudes, though. McDuding it out. McDude back and live. I'm just like, how many times can I say McDude here for like 3 seconds? I'm going to start timing myself on McDudes and Zephyr's E-Kittens and being like, how many E-Kittens can I talk about at this point in time? Because that's not on my bingo card for Monday when I tuned in to see that name change come through. I was like, you know what? I'm in for a good time. And then we've got the Skyhook ending for map number 2 and 202. Hey, you know, in winning that initial contest in Lava Fissure is paying off. They were only able to still have those 3 eliminations from that early matchup. But sitting on high ground, looking for rotations in is not a bad choice, but the E-Kitten Zephyr.
Well, we'll find a take, a 1v1 there, as it is lost by Nazedia on this Revenant. Still, though, it is a pickup, it is a KP, and it is a point on the board for the E-Kittens here on their way towards zone. They've got 59 seconds before we see the major close over to the side. And I'll tell you what, Ring 3 is oh so punishing, and the Rats are right here, living up to their name, just on the edge. An initial drop, make it another, crack on the other side, and for my E-Kittens, it will be dropped in 7.
We knew this was going to be rather tough when we had the map feed up, kind of showing the initial rotations just on the very far outside. Rats were going to pose a threat, not only to Myth, but E-Kittens, but cleaning up all of that is going to be very vital for them to kind of inch their way up that leaderboard. Now, granted, if you're just tuning in, map number 1, 25 points went to Red Dragon, still alive and at it in map number 2. Looking to run it back. Now, granted, last we saw of them was in that house on the outside of the choke to the right. Mania, Radiant transfer coming through, still coupling it with that bat. Only gonna take 5 seconds to get back up and forward. And that's gonna be Red Dragon holding out Rats.
This is tough, though. It's not just them holding out rats. If they get into a position to potentially fight here, you have the boys on the other side of this choice who are more than happy to elicit and look for any kind of fight. That is not a team who backs down from engagement. So for Red Dragon, who already knows zone is closing in, and they already have such a great position in this building, why overstep your boundaries? You know you're dominantly in control here. You know the zone is going to force at least the rats to make some choice decisions, get into good position, get some double breaks, and put yourself in the driver's seat.
And they're not necessarily committed to either choice, whether they decide to push through the tunnel or kind of carry on a little bit more north, but they're able to sit here and take apart that Rats roster with ease. They don't have to overextend. They prioritize the positioning, and it's so impressive. But checking in with Forbidden, running into a little bit of an issue outside the tunnel, and now Zeus last standing, playing around the Dark Veil. It's not going to be enough. Forbidden will be eliminated, and that gold knockdown coming in clutch.
The boys here were also in the midst of that Rats engagement. They found one there, so this is technically 4 KP off of their push towards the edge, and the best part about it is the fact that with this specific ring pull, they don't have to worry about that exchange with Red Dragon as that choke is closed off.
202 still vying in a building just on the inside of the ring. Looking rack up even more eliminations as elsewhere Passion has fallen.
That is surprising, at least in my sense of things here. Passion, a dangerous roster between 0-0, Denze, and EQ, 7th last week. They, can be a team to destroy some of these other rosters in this lobby. Just haven't been, I guess, in the position to really start things off well here. Granted, taken out by the likes of Stay Healthy, and arguably just as good fighting roster. But still, I know there's a lot of people out there that have some high expectations for Passion here.
Definitely true, and as we get to look at where that ring will be pulling, definitely different from the one in NA, but still going to be quite tough. 202 sitting privy to that, doesn't have too far to go. That fence line will be played a good chunk. For the team that can remain on the high ground, that's going to be a really tough one should they have to push off that eventually. I'd imagine they're going to be able to find as much KP as possible, just putting so much pressure on the teams rotating in. Will that be the winning spot? Maybe, or will they have to jump out? Possibly, but 40% worse on your screen right now. Mandy, the super sub, looking for a home. The energy, not going to be enough, just taking it out. You know what? We were talking about 40% worse, right? And I read it was something to do with them all being triple M in K, Zephyr. 0.4% Amos is not available to them. Yeah, there we go. We've got it.
All right. Legally, I'm not allowed to make any statements here officially on this broadcast, so I cannot say any more.
Do you play controller, Zephyr?
God, no.
Okay. Welcome home.
What do you think I am?
A heathen.
I apparently not. What the? Whoa.
I'm just kidding.
Whoa.
No,
All right,
you're good.
M&K
You're good.
goated, controller, brain rot apparently. No, I'm kidding.
Nah. But hey, Team Listen on the top of this building. Players electing to play the mid ground and now jump down to the bottom. Red Dragon, your map 1 winners have fallen. This opens the door for them to take down that points disparity that they had garnered from map number 1. Will it be 40% worse? Will it be Shiv? The Bangalore, the lone standing consistent Bangalore player since the dawn of Apex Legends.
Hey, I missed this man in that Bang meta. He would have went insane here. You can only hope that it still is the can't see meta, but I will say for 40% worse off of that recovery, they've got to be careful. LVH on their low ground is oh so difficult. On the other side of things, it looks like Linkser and crew facing their own fight here, and LVH want to get involved. Hearing the third-party opportunity, they'll jump in on need more bullets. Linkser, taking the time to stay quiet, will pop the revive from behind. A bit of trigger control, but too far, too late. Should have taken the shots when they counted. Still, though, for LVH, drop down with Vapes right now. A drop of the Rolling Thunder from Lifton doesn't present enough as they need to. For Jay Hanzo from behind with the Storm. 3 Dragons will find their elimination.
Liffin not able to get the shield swap before he falls, and is 3 Dragons able to capitalize on that moment. 40% worse, hitting that rotation, but I don't see Mandy. I only see Shiv and Zerifer on the low ground, utilizing the Bangalore smoke to be able to get them just enough time to recuperate and heal. The Radiant transfer coming in for 3 Dragons as they position themselves under here, but you know they're walking right towards 40% worse.
And they're not walking, they're launching forward to send themselves into it. Zerifer with that first knock. Shuzi's gonna take the time to let this one breathe and thrive here. Not interested to get involved as this remaining rat here. Stay healthy, still alive on that low ground. You can see players in the middle and none other than our friends, our previous Pro League fighters here. Team Listen, Kumbra, Strongest, Plum, all from the height here. Still alive. We didn't get to talk about it, but they're one of the few teams running that Newcastle here. The only team running it, and we'll see if it maybe gives them advantage here in this endgame.
Look, Newcastle can be so vital to make unplayable spaces playable as long as it is just used properly, because there are so many faults to a Newcastle in a composition. But at one point in time, it was a very tried and true coupled alongside Watson. Times have changed, and we are down to our final 5 squads in map number 2. But can we, yeah, you're oh my goshing about the space that 202 has, right?
Yeah, that is...
Yeah.
It's good. I mean, the only thing I worry about is in contesting a lot of this space here, you have to hope it lasts longer than the height or this spire is in major play for the Skyhook teams here. Because if they manage to play from this height longer than your cover is, of course, lasting out, 202 will be beamed before they even get the opportunity to sing. But I'll tell you what, Tiff, I don't think that's happening. The pull is over towards that western side, and it is extremely likely that they are going to be eliminated. From Team Listen, though, opting to play from the Valkyrie, utilize this rotation at the very end, give them but seconds to spare. I don't know if it's too early, but I'll tell you what, it's better than dropping directly down.
Ooh. OB here, clearing out their backside. Bloodhound scan effective to make sure no one is going to be hiding underneath the dark veil to split them, and basically trying to stay just a little bit safer as teams are rotating. The Digi-Threat, though, going to provide a lot of information through the smoke for here for Shiv. The duo, 40% worse, trying to throw down and find elimination points. That will be preferential, but Shiv gets caught off guard as a team of 3 looks down him at the line side. Stay healthy, falls, and now Zeri is going to fall as well. Shiv, last standing here in the final 4. Zephyr, can they withhold?
Stuck on the other side, though, will be taken out as we take it to 202 here in Team Listen from above. 202 on the other side of the wall with less than enough space to contest here. Meanwhile, behind a castle wall, Team Listen are finally forced to move out from their cover here. Now out in the open behind the mobile shield. 202 look for the opportunity to find a minor bit of damage, but Rakafaka looking lower and lower as Kumbra goes down from the height. Another knock found for Team Listen. 2v1 situation from behind. The minor double knocks in a 1v1. They pop off as 202 finds the win in the end.
That was looking very tough for 202 at one point in time, despite having all of that space controlled for them early on with the 5 teams remaining. It looked a little bit like a dance in that 1v2. They were able to clutch up at the hands of Miscom. Congratulations to 202, making it out of Lava Fisher and taking the map 2 victory with ease.
I'll tell you what, for 202, I am relatively surprised at this outcome here, especially off of what was a lot of that early information garnered by that zone. Notice when we talk about Skyhook early in this game, we were talking about a lot of presence toward that eastern side, right? And while yes, a lot of the central spire was still intact and had the opportunity for that zone, 202 not only play from the west, but they come in super late here. They were one of the last teams to walk into Skyhook, albeit completely uncontested because everyone is playing over in the east there. As a result, they take one minor fight and they are then present as the only team playing space out towards the west there to walk away. It was still a chaotic and absolutely skillful win there, but in the perfect scenario where they set up for greatness.
Yeah, they just held on and did everything well. Now, Team Listen, though, coming in from that center spire, looking to be kind of a mirror image of what the 100 Thieves roster looked like when they played Newcastle Watson Valk. I haven't seen that since so long ago. And to bring it here with that, that is so wild. And hey, a second place finish is not going to be bad. Let's go ahead and pull up the standings and see just how the leaderboard has shaken, knowing that Red Dragon fell just a little bit early, only getting 4 points for map number 2. But it's 202 Zephyr that were able to break down the distance.
It's a huge recovery for the likes of 202 here off of that win. Now only 5 points behind Red Dragon, but they've got to keep themselves wise here. Stay healthy in a lot of their presence, albeit we see them go down early in their initial fights. They still pick up a lot of good KP, and as a result, it keeps them extremely competitive. And the same can be said for teams like Players and Team Listen, who push only behind by 11.
Definitely, you can see just outside the top 10, Made in Heaven, 40% worse, Passion, but they're still relatively close. But for the Eat Kittens and Calm, Myth Esports, and Habibis, now it's the time to turn it around on that final match of World's Edge. We're going to cut to a quick break, but when we come back, map number 3. It's week 2 of the Apex Legends Global Series preseason qualifiers, and we have already wrapped up 2 insane matches on World's Edge, which means we have a third to come. I'm Tiffany, that's Zephyr, and we are here to bring you all of the action here on the Versus channel. But that also goes to say there's a lot of people that are at home doing watch parties, and huge shout out to you. I know, of course, we have Wig, we have Greek, and I believe Hackus is also doing one, so please go support all the homies. Well, but Zephyr, what are we feeling after the first 2 maps with the chaos ensuing? You said Skyhook. We got a Skyhook.
Yeah, that's actually kind of silly. literally went directly there. I guess I can conjure up these zones as they appear. I'll keep my mouth shut as out of respect to these teams to not give away too much information. But speaking of info, let's very quickly check up on those leaderboards before we jump in. Remind folks that yes, Red Dragon are still in the lead, but there's plenty of opportunities for these other teams to catch up.
You're not wrong on that aspect, with 202 and Stay Healthy rounding out the top 3, just 1 point shy. Players, Team Listen, tied for points there in 4th and 5th place respectively. But you got to think about it this way. Our teams, when they get wins, not only are they getting those 12 placement points that we talked about at the beginning of the broadcast, but they're coupling it with a good chunk of eliminations by prioritizing those engagements in the mid game based around their positioning, similarly to kind of how we saw Red Dragon do in map number 1 and try to recreate in map number 2, but couldn't necessarily make it towards that end game. They were only able to get 4 points in map number 2. But for the teams that find themselves outside of top 10 and outside of top 10 in the overall points that are going to be needed to get those final 4 spots in Pro League from the preseason qualifiers, this is where you need to start turning some things around, because you are going to have to make your way to the top, unseat 202, unseat Red Dragon from inside that, because at the end of the day, you have to find yourself in first.
That's the place you need to be if you want the easy access, the free entry door here. I say free, but it is probably the most expensive door in the world to walk into Pro League. You don't even get to walk. Apparently, you probably have to sprint or do something above that. I don't know.
What
What's
did it
faster
cost?
than sprinting?
Running, technically, right?
That's the same thing.
I mean, kind of. Actually, I
What
think
do you
sprinting
mean
is faster.
sprinting is faster than running?
Yeah, I was gonna say sprinting is. Look, I don't run. I jog slowly, Zephyr. I have small legs. I'm 5'2". I am not a frequent sprinter, dude. You're a giant compared to me.
That's true. When we're walking to on location on set, I make it there in half the amount of steps. It's
I'm just
terrifying.
Like,
I
bro,
get
why did
scared.
everyone
I'm
just
alone.
leave me?
You're
alone. What do you mean?
I make it there half the time, sprinting up the stairwells. Actually,
I have to like look up. I mean, between you, Dia, and Genome, my boxes that I have to stand on in person are just gonna keep getting taller. No, dude, I don't have to say anything. The broadcast outs me with the crane shots. What do you mean?
They turn right around. They see you're on a 2-foot platform. It is terrifying. There is some massive gents on the ALGS broadcast. Genome is a tall glass of water.
You know what? You're not wrong. But before we head into map number 3, we also have to talk about Dan Gaskin, bro. Color commentator of the year, esports awards, Genome nominated for desk analyst. I mean, look, I'm just telling you, we were talking about it on the NA broadcast. I feel as if year 4, I've got good vibes about it, Zephyr. I've got good vibes.
I think personally, like, oh man, this is like me going into like grandpa mode. You know,
Okay.
I think you know the talent and the changes and the evolution of Apex over the last 3 years, and I know a lot of people love to be critics. Seeing it in real time as things have continued to improve, as I see them in the foreground here, I mean, there's nothing that can make me more proud for this esport, for the fans out there, and for everybody who enjoys Apex. So it's not that I have a good feeling about year 4. I've had a good feeling about it the entire time.
Aw, Zephyr getting all in the good vibes right there. It's Christmas time, the holiday spirit. You've got the good feelings. But you know what I've got? I've got a good feeling about map number 3 in World's Edge as our teams kind of get into past that character select. They're in the dropship. We're locking, we're loading. Our eyes are on 202, the winners of map number 2, after making it out of that coveted engagement, the lava fissure fight that looked so jumbled in map number 2.
Hey, I'll take it.
It doesn't have to be pretty.
No, it does not have to be pretty for any one of these rosters on contest, especially for a team like 202, who was more than happy to take their time on the outskirts of Lava Fissure. They were happy to, I mean, maybe have a weaker start in that engagement, but still walk away with a win. And thankfully, this is hopefully the last time they have to do so here. World's Edge will be on its way out as we introduce Storm Point when we reach our halfway point. So one last win is all you need.
All right, 202, Aziel electing to do the same thing on the prior drop. It makes very sense when you've got your Catalyst player to be able to land, immediately find where those weapons are sprawled out on the ground and reinforce the doors. But this is where things are a little bit different on the team that is sharing Lava Fissure with them, right? When they know they went down just a little bit like separated apart from each other, talk about the dance that we're making here. They're taking the same path 202 is, but Micey and Co, they're switching things up.
Habibi's here, obviously separated on the outskirts here to give them that early loot instead of directly contesting. We'll finally regroup on center pillar here, albeit in doing so on that kind of edge rotation, they do take an exchange of damage. I know that's minor here, but contesting for similar spacing is going to make that difficult in terms of resource management. It is a good break from Myc that does rein things in a little bit, but they're still choking out here in terms of health. These are going to be some of the last resources that they have to support themselves as 202 does begin to lay pressure in from above.
And 202 is looking a little more solidified in the fact that they have better armor than Triple White, but at least are getting that information on whereabouts. But this is going to be really interesting. LVH, 2 purples, and a conduit player ready to hit that Radiant transfer the moment they need it, coveted, waiting for that third party as the fight is breaking out.
From 202, it's going to be a double knock, both sides in return there, but TTX is going to be immediately full wiped out here. That's going to give them the minor advantage, but LVH, they opt to draw their cards early here. Jay Hanzo with the distant knock on that 30-30 leaves 1 member remaining for 202, and the 2 for the Habibis here. Now crossing the distance into the center pillar here. We'll find drop onto Myc and leave 1 up on 1 up for both teams.
This is actually a really smart play for LVH here to be able to loot quickly and take on this third party for the contest, specifically because 202 went on from this to take that map to win. And if you can kind of cut them down early, as you'll see Habibis finally falling, that would essentially allow LVH to find some form, find some consistency throughout this, and shoot up the leaderboard themselves.
Well, at least for 202, they've made their way far and outside of this excursion here, already taking the balloon to look for that potential revive on the edge of these circles here. But for LVH, it's much needed KP, it's much needed points that should keep them competitive in the overall standings. I know 13 and 7th is technically nothing to shy away from in 2 games, but at least a win necessary, especially if this is a roster that wants to walk away with that Pro League spot by the end of our 6.
Rats, who maybe fell a little earlier than their liking in map number 2, sitting triple blue and have that Prowler. So overall, not a bad start for them here. Kind of hanging out at Overlook. They were gifted a nice crafter. Some good starts to map number 3. Now, curious to see if they'll be able to effectively tackle the teams, but it seems like they're calling out kind of just information specific to the teams ahead of them, but the boys roll up on a nice bit of res. I'd only imagine that's 202 Esports here.
Could be them potentially on this extra rotation out over towards the edge, or maybe one of our squads coming out of that thermal station. Nope, it is 202. They have gotten the full revive here, and the boys, they're looking to pressure where they know they have advantage. You know they heard that revive ship, and there is obviously the changes to the weapons and shields coming back. But even just a little bit of information, finding that white health, finding that blue, that's going to give them that kind of ego advantage that we know the boys love to play around.
Navigating this slew of rocks and boxes heading towards Dorito, but able to grab a shield crack onto the white. Arc Stars incoming. Clemmy will fall, but it's going to be Babylon's throwing down the trade as well. Needs to turn around and find 2. They just need the 3rd, and they're underneath, and just like that, Babylon's cleans up 202, and a nice 3 KP added to the boys.
And for 202, what could have been your claim to fame, your opportunity to get back into the top, is shut down here on World's Edge. We can only hope for the best for them on Stormpoint, but it leaves you scared, especially with teams like Players, Stay Healthy, Listen, all vying for the same spot. You're going to have a lot of work to do as we introduce our next map, though.
Calm. Outside the top 10 on points thus far, looking to kind of turn that around here in map number 3. Meanwhile, it's going to be Epicenter, where we will likely have a big engagement here between Passion. They're sliding in healthy, already able to grab 1 knock and finish onto Luxor, setting their sights to where the rest of the remaining team for them are.
Struggle right now, but kind of finding that last member going to take some time in turn. It's just going to be the arguable setup as we talk about this more eastern rotating zone. Most of these teams already vying for a lot of position over out towards our no-name in Overlook. For Passion, maybe playing a bit of the gatekeeper right now, clearing out their backside and then slow rotating in. Could be that game plan, knowing that they do like to fight things out.
Definitely able to survive a little bit longer there for MiG dudes, but they have that ring information, and honestly, Epicenter might be on the pathway for a lot of teams having crafting available to them and a potential respawn beacon should anyone find themselves needing to call in a friend on their team back into the fray of things. But the way Passion is kind of spread out here, hitting that ring console, getting that next
So good.
information. Are we really going? Are we going where I think we're going? No.
Kinda. This is
No.
yeah, a little bit further north this time around. This one's gonna be that interesting end when it comes towards the. Wow, just being silly right now.
A silly little Zephyr with
Just
silly
being-
little Zephyr Z kittens
yeah.
in a good position here. Let's be
Okay.
real.
Okay. I will say this, it is not that dominant end zone that we see on those buildings towards our no name where teams like to set themselves up. Instead, look towards the height that you see Myth containing themselves within, and over on this edge. It's not a lot of actual playable space in the early game here, but if you're able to transition that later on, especially if you're a north rotating team able to play from that height, it can be very, very good here. You have to hope and pray for my E-Kittens as they find their way into this house. It can be the happy home potentially, unless this continues to vie even further north here. And that rotation, that can be incredibly punishing, especially without really any rotational too. This composition is, I mean, it's all or nothing. You either find the shots, you either find the damage exchange, or...
Yep. Totally.
Okay. There's only one thing you're paying attention to. On this one.
I'm just all I see are just all the shots, and I'm just like, bro. Honestly, it would be epic if some of those did hit. I
Okay.
respect it. I really do. But let's go ahead and turn our tides over to Fragment. LVH needing a solid game here. Now, granted, they might be okay with the points and the consistency coming into week 2 with 1440 on points. That'll put them in that overall lead. But knowing they want to clean this out, they could cohab this space here, but knowing where that zone could potentially pull out of these buildings towards kind of the upper area side of Epicenter, I mean, oh, this can just get so disgusting if someone wants to play kind of that outside train line, and those like carts. They're just gonna walk straight into the mix of things.
It's not the worst here, and you know there would be a further position held by LVH if it wasn't already taken by Made in Heaven here, as that's going to be the thing that gives you that necessary rotation, but they are a team that can take the fight, that puts them in that better spot. For the likes of Passion here, we talk about how they like to fight. We talk about these slow rotations and already taking advantage of this god spot held by Myth. Feels like deja vu from game 1 here. Now, with one member remaining, make this cross, find that last member here, and for Passion, should be in the position to potentially win out this game. They're going to lose out, I believe, on that final member of Myth, but, I mean, they won in my book. It may not be the KP, but they've come out on top here. Also, Kraber.
Also Kraber. It's like, see something shiny, it's Kraber. Get the Kraber. Denze is like, I want the Kraber. In the hands we go, dropping that weapon, immediately electing that. But now, since we tune back to Fragment, we can see just how many people are making their way. You have Calm in the upper right. We have LVH in that more center building. Zeus and Co kind of to the left from Forbidden Gaming, and still over towards Diner is a team. So a lot of these teams will look to collapse upon each other, and there will likely only be 1 or 2 left standing before this zone potentially pulls out of Fragment. And that exodus that will occur as we navigate towards the train line could be quite tough.
Well, for most of these teams, it's not something that they currently have to worry about. A lot of this space is going to be well and in play here. And we get a little bit of that mix-up, but it's exactly what we were discussing in our early game. That noticeable height on that cliffside going to be so good for these final positions here, especially given the fact that we're not so far west to get a lot of that pipeline and the train line in action, and we're not so far east that we give the cart or some of these houses into a place of control. To be honest, it's feeling like a situation where you're either from height or it is bust here. There's only going to be minor, and I mean minor, low ground cover available for maybe 3 or 4 teams when we start to talk about this last remaining endgame. So, the fight for height, the fight for the north is going to be the condition I am watching all game long here. Passion are in the pursuit to potentially be the host of it. They got to be careful. They've got to cover their backside, and even more importantly than that, they can't let some team Valkyrie ult or evac into that spot well before they get the control and lay down with that Watson.
Yeah, that's honestly what I'm worried about here. Passion, Denze with the Kraber, they're going to be able to maybe pick up some knocks from afar as teams like 40% worse find themselves quite far out towards the north and will have to make a play. But it's also going to be your E-Kittens that have kind of the no-name area locked, and they'll be able to walk up to the train line, but not before Backlethal. They find themselves underneath in a little situation as they grab that knock onto Thon, turning it into maybe a 3v1. We just need the final member.
They're for stay healthy in potentially their final moments, and it's not looking much better for the likes of 40% worse there. You can see it in that kill feed. Andy and Shiv already dropped here, leaving just Zerafer to be that last residual member to potentially pull it off. Going down 18th, though, would be a huge hit to their current success. Meanwhile, Red Dragon, our winners from game one, toe-to-toe, fight for fight here up against Team Listen. Albeit not winners, they still are a dangerous entity to behold that forces Red Dragon back up towards the site, here for the resets.
Seems as if 40% worse and Calm in the kill feed having a bit of trouble here, but Shiv able to get back on their feet with that gold knockdown, and G-Dolphin and co. Bullets gonna fall. Myth Esports to join them down to 16 squads as the ring still at the backs of Passion, but not really advancing further towards where they need to go. But it's LVH that have inched ever so closely towards where they need to move over here in Fragment East with the boys.
This is what I was curious about, the boys. This is the team that had opted for the exchange of height here. It's a huge chunk of damage down, but it's not enough to give them that full force that they're looking for here. But this was our worry. Passion has that god spot. They have control of everything. And instead, they put too much pressure out towards the north. And yes, there still will be that boys v Passion fight here in a moment. But the boys are dominantly now in control. They have this early exchange and will very likely be in the position to win it. The only thing that I can imagine here is you get some movement over from the eastern side. A team like 3 Dragons or Red Dragons moving in to make that exchange across the zip here sometime later.
Ooh, this is going to be challenging, Zephyr. 3 Dragons who barely made it into the finals lobby by 1 point, sitting here in a rather tough situation, knowing how all of these teams are kind of rotating in, especially when you need to peek towards high ground. Yes, Sunzi able to deal significant amounts of damage, but you have to be able to capitalize on that. The Dark Veil will come through, and now we can see with the ring at their back, vying for any kind of position. Sunzi able to get out of dodge, but I believe will fall rather shortly if you don't get into that zone.
Taking their time to clear out their backside here. Red Dragons are still covering this rotation. And Juzinoni, as a result, 3 Dragons will be inevitably found out here. Red Dragons kind of having some minor difficulties getting up to this height branch. It should be able to climb up in the end and play out from this east. And this is going to be something that we talked about. Able to put pressure down among the likes of the boys and Passion here. Looks like the boys facing difficulties being early eliminated. Seems like you have a mixture of teams getting involved, notably 40% here who catch them on their drop. Just ahead of them, my E-Kittens nestling themselves into a comfy hole here to hopefully last towards this end game.
Look, if there's going to be any team that eviscerates your E-Kittens right now, it's going to be 40% worse. But LVH vying for the high ground here. Forbidden Red Dragon, they have fallen, hitting that quick res on Hanzo if they can. But we must keep an eye here, able to play just this sliver of rock. It's not going to be in, but you need to stay relatively hidden for at least the next 48 seconds here as Bakla has fallen.
This is so hard for 40% worse. They're not in zone yet. The minute they come out into playable space, they're going to be right in front of everybody. Meanwhile, for players, they know how good this height is. As a result, it's the full wipe onto Jay Hanzo here from LVH, and they continue to try to source out the remnants of that LVH roster. Still, though, it is a position of control, and they just barely did they miss out on the fact that they're below them. Kazakh dropping down below as height is a minor advantage, sends LVH home in 9.
They send them home, but they also send themselves into a open line
Very
of sight
nice.
for the teams that are going to be ensuing. A great Dark Veil there to allow Satisfaction just a moment to be able to get the shield bat off before kind of reassessing. But they're not alone on the high ground, Zephyr.
That is none other than Passion. Here early, they survive out what is the exchanges from the likes of many squads here as players now look to close the gap in exchange. Meanwhile, the E-Kittens finally sent upon by the likes of 40% worse here. It is going to be the double knock drop just left up to Nizetia on the other side somewhere, has now but a rat the last out. Meanwhile, Made in Heaven, they've been here all game long, crossing out with that Dark Veil. Surprisingly, they are surviving, but they've got some minor rats from behind they've got to pay attention to.
Look, we've had some big nade action throughout our semifinals, but here in the finals, some key moments there as Remix using them to kind of zone off that Dark Veil, trying to give Phonetic and Co. just a little bit of time to heal, but when the pressure is on from too many sides, Made in Heaven will fall in. Calm looking to join them relatively soon, but between a rock and a hard place, it's not enough. 6 squads remaining.
Meanwhile, players making for quite the exchange off of height here as the E-Kittens will be found out from above. Passion from this high ground, so good at putting damage down where it counts here. And this is the position that has lasted all game to give them this advantage. The question, though, now remains, with only seconds on the clock and height soon to be lost here, do they have the option for survivability? Because you have teams like 40% worse who are going to catch you immediately on your drop. The same can be said about players from below.
Hear me out. Mandy on the horizon needs to use a grav lift and couple with shift. That would be like a very aggressive fight, and I'm not sure what the clock timer is, but if you could take out high ground or potentially wait for Passion to jump down into the open arms of 40% worse, players kind of nestled on that rock. It will be a fight that I don't think they're necessarily going to move just yet, but there's always one McDude lying around. Always one, and he's been ratting since the dawn of time here in map 3.
I say ratting, but I mean, they know exactly where he is, especially Passion here. And I mean, it's going to come down to a decision. And even, I'd be curious, they know he survived for that long. You know it's a single person left alive. Send it. Just, walk on top of him, take him away, and Passion have a space to play here. The only worry, though, is they've got players on the other side whose attention apparently is on them. And 40% worse, albeit alive, are left with free opportunity, free survivability.
And now we wait. The Rolling Thunder's coming in. Denze throwing down a lot of damage. Good shield swap right there, but Zero will fall. Dark Veil pushing towards Passion, and now last standing for them. It's either going to be players or it's 40% worse. Who is it going to be? The fact that you're still alive is absolutely chaotic. Passion has fallen. Now 40% worse. Mandy, Shiv, Zerafer walk into a clean engagement and take map number 3.
We say 40% worse, but I'm looking to see them improve maybe better than 40%, probably 100 after last week for them. It's the first win of the day, but potentially the first win of many here. 40% worse with an utterly perfect control there at the end. They knew they did not have to get involved. They bided their time so well here and let that fight take place just ahead.
It was quite impressive considering when you think back to just a few rings prior, they were so far north and things were looking a little dire for them. But a gold knockdown, a few reses, and a journey on to that coveted spot. And you're right, the patience, knowing that they had ample space behind there in cover and just had to walk in at the right time. Let's go ahead and pull up those standings and see just how much better that fared for 40% worse. And let's go in third, 32 points. Obviously not bad and a better game for Red Dragon, but they have effectively been unseated by players who has not won a game, but has been finding themselves making it towards the end consistency and picking up those eliminations.
Hey, all you really need to know is if you were paying attention before this and afterwards, 40% worse just went from 12th to third here. They put up a massive, and I mean insurmountable 24 off of that game, and that's going to put them in the potential as we walk into Storm Point to potentially be one of those Pro League squads. We talk about, for these three men, the opportunity to be back in Pro League, to be in the doghouse again for the first time in, for some of their cases, years.
You know, this makes me really excited. If we could see Shiv and Co. back in Pro League, it would just, can you just imagine regular season on Pro League? But I mean, regardless, so many of our players throughout our 3 matches on World's Edge have made this so enticing. Mere 2 points separating players and Red Dragon. Will turn the tide and shake things up in Storm Point? Well, I guess we'll find out after a quick break. Three different maps, 3 different winners, but it's a different name altogether that has found themselves so far at the top of that coveted leaderboard. Zephyr, let's go ahead and pull up the standings real quick before we turn our tides over to Storm Point and kind of lay out that land once again for the people who might have just joined us here at the Versus GG broadcast.
I'll tell you what, in comparison to last week where we saw No Days Off dominantly leading by 50 odd plus points before our half here, it is still anybody's race going into our final 3 games of the day here. The point spread between the likes of first all the way down even to 10th is just 21. That means one good game is still enough for some of these teams, especially our middling competing ones, to put yourself potentially in first place. And you don't even have to do it in one game. You have the opportunity to put up 2, 3 good games and potentially have a chance at Pro League.
Ooh, the potential of getting that chance at Pro League. I'm excited. Look, this is just the preseason qualifiers, and we have seen so many different legend compositions, so many fun changes, and especially with the map changes that we've witnessed on Storm Point, this is some of the first kind of foray that we get to witness of all those POIs playing out. Pylon, Ceto Station, just the changes up towards Lightning Rod, and it has been such fun to witness. But for our teams that have found themselves at the top of the leaderboard, can players withstand as we turn that attention towards the chaos that Storm Point can handle?
And the thing that I'll be watching more than anything here is, especially as we've kind of gotten to know some of these teams like players, right? Red Dragon, 40% worse here. Passion. I mean, they have been around for a while, either in present within the Pro League or even Challenger Circuit in some regards here. And so when it comes to something like Stormpoint, albeit it is new in certain regards, I'm curious to see how much of that prior experience, the play that they have seen on those levels, bleeds into the impacts that we see here. Because remember, this is a mixed opportunity. It's not just the best who have been previous pros. You do have a lot of those kind of challenger oriented teams who never have been in Pro League vying for a spot.
That is actually a very good point because you're right. There are some relatively new names here that might not have a lot of that experience when there are so many players throughout all of our different rosters that have all that coveted experience. I mean, we were talking kind of about G Dolphin on Need More Bullets, just constantly subbing in and trying to find that home for himself and that dedicated roster to be able to get into that regular season with. But then you have people that are returning to competitive from some time off. You have Shiv, you have Mandy, Tai Sheen, like of essentially these legends to the Emea scene. And if we can get even just a sliver of them back into the fray of things with some new young guns, it's going to be just a joy to behold.
I mean, we got that with no days off last week, right? Those
Yeah.
are new young guns here. So now it's up to some of the friends that we have seen previously potentially to take that spot away. A huge, by the way, shout out to Shiv. I don't think people realize how crazy this is. The last time Shiv was in Pro League, y'all, was year 2 split 2. I mean, it has been since 2020, the very beginning of 2022, that our man was playing in professional Apex Legends, and he still comes in today alongside Manny and Zerifer and is representing a way that, I mean, I don't think people realize how insane it is to be able to pull off wins on the level of a Pro League qualifier or even on the exchange of what could be Pro League for a team like 40% worse. So I mean, especially after minor injuries and a bunch of other stuff, I'm incredibly impressed that he still has it. I mean, I am the Shiv Glazer today.
I mean, I at least, yeah. I I have nothing to say. You already have one team that is literally your e-kittens in here, so if you want to glaze for some other teams, that's great, Zephyr. I love this for you. But you're not wrong. You did have a very viable point that I thought was quite impressive. It's they still have it. After Apex launched in 2019 to reign supreme at a very high competitive level and maintain that throughout your journey of Apex, despite all the changes, all the new legends over the course of things, and still find the passion to compete here at the highest level. That is something that a lot of people may not have. And Shiv, should they qualify here today, maybe they double down, maybe get another win here as we turn towards Stormpoint. We have that character select. That would be kind of a good start to the year.
I would love, I'd love to tell the Shiv story. If this is a team that makes it into Pro. And I'm serious. Someone made a joke on Reddit the other day, a Shiv bioptic, right? The
Ooh.
opportunity to talk about the solo queue goats and to his injury with his hands to coming back into it and still qualifying. If that's not Apex, if that's not the massive need that EMEA wants right now, I don't know what is.
All I need is a lifeline. Where's me? No, literally, that's all I
Left
want.
line! Left line!
Let's be real. There's so many of us out there that need it. But as we make our way to Stormpoint, our players dropping in to their relative drop spots, we are underway. Who will unseat players from that coveted top spot on the leaderboard? And why will it be 40%? Wait, no, I'm just kidding. We're not casting cursing anyone here.
I swear, there's like, are we allowed to be like a little bit more biased during preseason qualifiers? Like, I know during Pro League we're like strict. We represent every single team.
Where TSM?
I don't even have
Where?
a choice. I literally am sitting here saying my own name on broadcast today, like literally 5 or 6 times.
I mean, look, I think you actually paid them at this point too.
I didn't.
Uh-huh.
Honestly, I'm very honored. It is really cool. I want everyone to know that no relation whatsoever. It's very nice that a team kind of is going out of their way. They've enjoyed the casting, I guess, for this long.
I am enjoying it, and your kittens are over there in command center. We did get a semblance of where that next ring will go, so keep your eyes towards barometer, towards calm, as that is where a lot of our teams will have to make their way. So with 40% worse coming off that win over there at Echo HQ, they'll have a rather not a long haul to get over towards barometer. They'll have to fight their way to a Bacalao and probably hold off some of those chokes. But for McDudes, they've got a haul.
Yeah, I mean, the thankful thing regarding a lot of the changes that we see, especially with Zeus and Lightning Rod in this position, is that rotationally they're still very good. Right, playing from the north here still provides an advantage for getting XP in rotations, especially like something like this or the evacs that might come through. And I mean, we've seen it previously. You can split at least 2 POIs ahead here and make this exchange. I just hope that McDudes, recognize that with early rotations does come running into these POIs with teams that are still well in position. They'll be passing over players right now as they, will happily glide all the way on over to almost Cascades. That's what I mean.
Yeah, that is why we love northern rotations towards the southern side, because you can just fly for eternity. And we were talking about dragons earlier, but I think the McDudes have found themselves glazing down on some wings, but not a bad location to kind of stop and get a lay of the land of Cascades. You can kind of just chill here, see, hey, are there any teams that we need to worry about in Cascades? Can we hit potential crafting around this area? Is that going to be available for us? But nevertheless, we make our moves.
Straight into Cascades there, and for many of these teams, the rotations are expedient. 40% worse, finding themselves in the Trident, albeit a little bit damaged. I mean, you gotta be a little bit more respectful as you break into the barometer area there, as the shots are starting to come through. They're looking low, but just as they hop off, this building should be more than safe and available for a playable endgame spot, and obviously further transitions now.
Ooh, I like the preemptive smoke to kind of close out anyone kind of looking at this team as they navigate where they'd like to play in barometer from. The issue that they can run into with getting into these positions so early on is they didn't really get a good chunk of time to find some good loot. It's not bad, kind of a bare bones 30-30. As long as you have a scope for the 30-30, thumbs up, because that iron sight at a distance, yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
I'll say this, though, at least for 40% worse and some of these other teams that have made their way in early alongside Calm, Bacalao, Mayhem, and Passion, right? I mean, even if you're maybe not set upon the best loot or the scenario that will give you, a dominant control of this POI, I mean, think about today, games 1 through 3. We have seen a wide variety of success from multiple rosters, and just being present in these positions that will get you a top 5 position, that's enough. I mean, if you're just looking to put up good points every single game, consistency, something like No Days Off was capable of in preseason qualifier number 1, that's it. That's all you need. It doesn't always have to be the most exorbitant super loot, great path, extra kills. It just needs to be enough points that you're always a threat.
Zephyr, the Apex life coach, coming in. Be present, everyone. Be present.
Thanks, y'all.
I don't know why my brain
Be
just
happy.
latched onto that. Be present. Be happy with the loot that you were given here in map number 3, and may you find success on your journey.
All right. Apparently, Zephyr the Guru. He's a kitty. He's a guru. What else is next, y'all? A coach?
Conjuring the... you are, and actually, Texas A&M, didn't they get a nice coveted win yesterday?
Most
What?
points, not the match point, though.
Yeah, I saw the leaderboard, and I tuned into a little bit of the broadcast to see how it was going, but now
Appreciate
we
it.
anchor down to look at the devastation of where the E-Kittens roam free. These like some Maine Coons, like these E-Kittens. I know what E-Kittens
they're
are,
really
but
cute. I don't know if you've seen the logo yet. They're quite literally.
Oh,
So, we'll see. They're
I
gonna try to
look it up.
pressure here, at least an entry into the midst of Team Listen. Break on the door, but Listen already taken secondary height, not wanting to get involved. This is a very hard push. Watson into a Newcastle is not a very advantageous change. I will say, though, I like the fact that we move away from a little bit of the kind of, I don't know, something comps that we saw on World's Edge. Catalyst, Bangalore, alongside. You see that conduit with that energy barricade already down. Could be better.
You know, it's not bad. They just need to find some kind of opening, but before long, there will be teams looking to rotate throughout this. Can Mayborn find an opening area, or will Angie have to just kind of barrel her way into there? But you've got 3 members just fenced in with the pylon, with the Newcastle wall. They are... Why do I feel like I just finished up Kingdom of Ash, let me just tell you, and I feel like I'm looking at the members of Terrasen trying to barricade themselves in Orinth, and only a handful of people will ever understand that before the reinforcements come through. But let's turn our tides to Passion. Passion with some early game action as Rats kind of find some intricacies happening to them in the kill feed.
We'll see as teams contest and take up a lot of quick space against each other. Something notable about Stormpoint this time around, especially in comparison for World's Edge, is the fact that 20 are still alive. Every single team is still present in this endgame. And even for Zephyr's Ekins, who are trying to contest our nut building out here, Forbidden, trying to play into that same space, has already arrived.
All right, well, since Zephyr's E-Kittens were not able to penetrate the egg and take down Plume and Strongest and such, now Forbidden Gaming looking to make a play onto this between a rock and another rock with some piercing spikes to hold their way. They just need to find some... You know, I don't like this space. I feel like you can easily get stuck here and approach from multiple angles, and this is not where I would want to be fighting.
But it's tough here when we talk about a lot of the presence that exists within Barometer. Granted, there's very likely something that is available to play. It's just hard to spot that out when, one, we've moved away from things like that Valkyrie meta, and things like that evac tower have become more coveted, especially for endgame utilization and these later rotations that can be more awarely punished. You might not really be able to find that position, so you're forced to play from what feels like a less advantageous edge here. At least for Forbidden, they are going to try. They pull back behind this choke so that they have the safety to potentially use this evac. But in the end, they don't even pull for it. Shots from the boys are already too much to handle, and they don't want to be risked tracked up this balloon.
Which happens so frequently that you have to be able to find yourself in a relatively safe space before you can get out. But now that the boys have put themselves into the mix and they're kind of just looking around, knowing where each and every team is before extending too far, knowing that the chances are if they cover the distance and they get into the mix, someone will third party them. But playing kind of this fence line outside of Watson's pylon, not necessarily a bad situation for the time being. They can fight their way out. They have that capability, and the Rolling Thunder available to FACO as well. So it's just a matter of time here. Meanwhile, we already have so many teams that have been utilizing this time to set up in Barometer.
And to be honest, we're not going to see much of a change there. It's going to come down to a lot of these teams and how they make their impacts on this further rotation. A team like the boys who pressures out from the edge and then somehow maybe makes the exchange over into a position like this. Something notable, though, is we see our friends from that initial 202 excursion, Habibis, as they've found their way into a house here, and surprisingly, it is available. And now, notably, this is what is looking to be a zone that plays out a little bit more over towards that western side, albeit, I mean, a lot of space still available there as well. Teams like Passion and Three Dragons, the only two who are consisting of playing a present space there. So maybe for rosters like Need More Bullets Made in Heaven or the Ekins, this is an opportunity for you maybe to sniff something out and make that cross.
Yep. And depending on where this zone starts to pull inside of Barometer, I'd like to keep an eye on LVH kind of holding one of the northern positions, coming into map number 4 in 9th place with 17 points. This Stormpoint round of matches is going to be very critical for them to kind of shoot themselves up the leaderboards. Now, granted, they did come in with the most points out of everyone aside from at that point No Days Off, but they went ahead and won. So at that point, they've already solidified themselves in Pro League. But with that pool being everything that LVH did not need for them, this is going to be incredibly vital to fight their way. But first off, we've got 202 that's still trying to make their way in.
saw, need more bullets down here to the low ground, and on the other side was the boys originally here with the full heal. Miss Kim is immediately spotted out from behind. It's none other than Babylon to find that initial knock for Rockfuck and Ozzy Owl. It's but seconds to spare here as another knock is found, and for 2-0-2, as good as their early win was today, fighting against that 3v3 composition is as difficult as it gets.
Yep, they won map number 2 and came into this with only 25 points, 12 points outside of that lead. Can be rather unfortunate for them, especially when they keep running into some early rotational engagements and just getting held out. Hopefully they can turn the tide of that in the final 2 matches of the day. But for Forbidden Gaming, who have found themselves still in a relatively similar position, starting to turn towards making their way into Barometer.
You say making your way into Barometer. I mean, they better boot, scoot, and boogie on over. That is as far as it gets there, and playing out from the edge on the northern side on a close will be punished when there are still 19 squads left standing going into our round 3 close. This is going to be the mass elimination here for so many of these teams. For Passion, playing this building, knows they have a god spot, but knows they need to defend it. A drop onto Cinetic, a great black hole, and from above, EQ is left unpunished here to find that initial damage. Wrap around the backside, drop remix, and leave 1 left standing.
Bro, why are we letting EQ out here like a freaking assassin, just able to walk all over these players and still able to keep doing it to Maiden Heaven as they fall? Passion picking up some well-needed eliminations here, coming into this map with 28 points, just 9 points outside of the first place, but turn your tides into the depth of Barometer. You can see 40% worse just on the other side, potentially on the inside of the center spire here. There will be that team on top. Your E-Kittens are over by Grav Cannon trying to make their way in. Look, this is going to be a little interesting. LVH able to take off a good chunk of that real estate at the northern section of this. They do have the longest rotation. They have to make their way through Stay Healthy, through Forbidden, and Team Listen. Look, they're all going to collapse, but it's Passion who won that coveted spot and a good position in that next circle. That might have just won them the game.
I mean, it is definitely the god spot currently for the likes of Passion as our zone continues to cater over to that western side, but it's not just going to be Maiden Heaven who puts pressure down. So many other rosters are going to look to do the same. For Team Listen, after 2nd place in our last matchup here, they've got one of the furthest rotations to work with, but no real way to cover that distance. What feels like double control-based Legends, albeit a support on Newcastle. All they really have is defensive positioning here. Something like an evac probably no longer available, but greater distance to cover. 40 seconds on the board, and they've got to make their way somehow into the direct set-us-on stage of Barometer itself.
Aku just kind of biding their time. The Kittens have fallen, and Team Listen at the hands of taking them out as they seek to cover the distance, get some of that well-needed loot, and carry their way on. Now having the space of the Grav Cannon, which you can see is in direct line of sight from the tops of Barometer. So we look to kind of our options for rotations here for Kumbra. They have an evac tower available to them, but they also have been playing that Newcastle Watson, but electing to throw in Kumbra on the Bangalore as opposed to having a Valk for Storm.
This is tough here, but surprisingly allowed to really claim some extra distance over there towards the edge, as they will probably find themselves a home below the eastern side of the direct Barometer. For LVH, nowhere closer themselves to getting outside this building. Rolling Thunder will pressure them off of any kind of take on the interior here. Evac still available, as surprisingly they'll look to actually take this. They're not just going to use it to take height, and that's something that easily is punished out there. Long knock drop, Masuko there with the Kraber in hand, takes Griffin out here, and as a result, that forces, well, potentially what could be the end of LVH. Vaves and Jay Hanzo now as a duo to try to play out this endgame.
Shiv, the Warlord, and 40% worse have fallen off screen. Bacalao to join them, and Need More Bullets might be another one to fall, as we have 14 squads nearing that final zone. Try hard Thor, last standing, able to get a shield swap, but still not able to really move from the distance. It's going to be Calm, able to get a good chunk of damage on before he's able to snake their way out. So many have fallen, Forbidden being the latest, but Calm trying to make a play towards the other side of Passion. This is kind of a tough situation to try and hold, but so long as no one rotates out towards the front of Taishin, this might be all right.
Honestly, I like it. I mean, they take advantage of that height that they had from the initial barometer spire, and they played down knowing what was the most available playable spot. As a result, they're going to be one of the few teams that do get to work with the outside. If that building pull isn't as favorable for Passion, they're going to be one of the few who can elicit control, taking up space on the outskirts. The only thing they've got to worry about is this mass amount of teams still stuck within inside here. Babylon plays that basically perfectly as they take out Habibis, but the drop from above is, well, too much to handle. The McDudes make McShort work there.
McDudes coming into some of the final circles with their full team, but I will say the only thing I've been seeing lately of these Newcastles throughout the entire two maps is that there's always a Newcastle wall, and it's not a Newcastle team that occupies it. So a lot of these teams are just walking into spaces with a free wall in Denze with Passion, still expanding out on their earlier positioning and just taking down people challenging for them. Latest to that is going to be Red Dragon.
This is going to be one of the few times that they're able to do so, because as this next zone closes in, it's going to be a lot harder for them to actually pressure control on the outskirts of these buildings without they themselves getting taken down here. We tune back in over to Stay Healthy, a team that has been in the running oh so long here. Masuko, Craver in hand, 3 bullets left standing here. One good knock would give them the rotation that they potentially need, but hey, gone with the 30-30, that's more than enough. Might not be the Kraber, but that's all they want. Passion, move out again! Wipe out 3 dragons.
They just leave their building, take out a team, grab lift back towards the top, and can just stare down everyone. McDude's the latest team to fall into the top 5, and Stay Healthy just trying to stay alive at this point and take down as many people in their wake, putting up at least 3 eliminations. You can hear the audio cue on the Dark Veil to join theirs, and Thawne, the retribution from afar, and they will fall. But Passion with such dominance here on that building, that earlier engagement winning that for them, but now they just need to find the rest of them. Regardless, it's still players at the top of the leaderboard coming into map number 4.
And that's the big thing here. They're in a position maybe not to win out this game, still with plenty of options in their wheelhouse, with 60,000 death boxes also there as well here. It's the consistency. It's the numbers that will keep them potentially competitive all day long. My real question, though, that exists here is we talk about Passion in 4th. We know they've got KP. We know they've got KP galore after their initial fights here within this building. A pickup of a win alongside that would be absolutely monumental when they need it most. It's players versus Passion. Taishin as a solo rat here for the likes of Kong.
Honestly, they do still have a Dark Veil available to Passion. They could essentially isolate players out and just ignore Taishin at that point and just clean them up towards the end. But if you're Taishin, you're waiting for that, albeit 3v3 engagement that you can seek to third party and maybe grab some KP.
Looks like players know the involvement of Taishin already after they were kind of the ones who got involved in that initial take versus comp and didn't finish the job. You can see them clearing space and jumping across there. That's that full elimination. Now, a 3v3 scenario, the perfect black hole from above is not immediately eliminated. Still though, Denze with the peek over on the side with the alternator will find massive damage, but not before he himself falls out on the backside. Still though, Passion from above, Passion wrapping around here, Passion with the choke on the knockdown, find the win in game 4.
More passion, more energy, more footwork, more footwork. Regardless, it was a very clean ending there for Passion and that well-needed 3v3 to take the building and go through everyone who challenged them. A new winner there, and we know that is going to have a very large effect towards that leaderboard, but congratulations to them. Regardless, though, players, they make it consistently yet again to the end game. They've had a slew of top 3 finishes, and honestly, that's been really hard for anyone else to kind of compete against that to take them off the top of the league.
And I hate to say it here, unless we see a monumental amount of points accumulated by the likes of Passion, still a fantastic game that's going to put them in the driver's seat for 5 and 6, it's very likely that players are still in the lead after this game here. A second place with the majority of KP that they picked up is going to be enough.
Will it? I mean, let's pull up those standings. Let's see just how things have shaken up after map number 4, our first game on Storm Point. It is still players that is able to reign supreme, picking up almost a 20-point game. If my math is correct, it was just shy, 19 points for them, but Passion moving from 28 points to 52. Still a monumental game for them as well, but it's Red Dragon rounding out the top 3. You can see that point disparity between second and third. So now, if you find yourself outside of the top 2 at this point, you have 2 final matches to really shake things up. It's week 2 of the Apex Legends Global Series preseason qualifiers, and so far we have had an action-packed day of Emea region. Now, granted, Zephyr, you've got your kittens out there. We've got a lot of things going in, but the end of the map for them, passion exuding from the players and able to take a well-needed victory, but not able to unseat the leaderboard.
No, as we take a look at the leaderboard here, they are still behind the likes of players who show up in second that game. But you cannot walk away from today, especially if Passion are the team to get into Pro League without representing this last and fourth game. It's a huge turnaround, and like you said, shakes up the leaderboard to the point where players no longer feel safe here. Kazik, Fatu, Jukes, this is the potential opportunity for them to take it all, and it is still yet guarded by the likes of 0-0, Denze, and YQ.
Yeah, this is going to be very vital for the teams that have found themselves outside the top two. Now, granted, Red Dragon could pull off a rather dominating performance here in the final two matches and take that down, because what we are witnessing is the teams that are winning, you're winning with double-digit eliminations. Look back to Red Dragons, map number 1, a win with 13 eliminations. 202, map 2, a win with 12 eliminations. 40% taking 12 eliminations on that map number 3. And even with a dominating performance from Passion on map number 4, it still wasn't enough. Players has been insanely consistent, just lying in wait and racking up double-digit eliminations just alone in map 3, and I believe even 4. So for the final two maps of the day, everything is on the line for that top position, but it's not over until it's over. We saw just what happened with 40% worse in the semifinals, right? Going into that final game, I think they needed 4 points, and they were able to make it happen to get themselves into the finals lobby. They've already won a map, and they could totally do it again.
And the same can be said for so many of our other
Yep.
teams like Red Dragon and Stay Healthy, the boys 202 as well, albeit the gap is starting to truly balloon here as we breach past that 50-point mark and likely into the 60 or potentially 70 as we break away into our final games today. There still is the opportunity with two, albeit phenomenal, but great games ahead, that you can have the opportunity to go into Pro League. And still, at the end of the day, I know we didn't bring it up, even if you are not the squad to get into Pro League off of today's match, competing for those top positions is still so important. We brought up the fact that we're seeing a lot of repeat offenders here in our Pro League qualifiers. It's not going to be a year where you can just show up to every single final and get the free walk into Pro League. There is going to be that exchange regarding the points that comes down to truly who gets that opportunity at the end.
And I think that's a very solid point that we need to discuss, right? LVH, they have the most points coming into today with Stay Healthy, just 30 points shy of them. 202 with 1,380, and then the boys 1,350. And if you look to kind of the correlation on the leaderboard that we have thus far after 4 maps, Stay Healthy is up there. 202 is up there. So we're making some things happen. And even with the boys, they are also up there inside kind of that top 10 and will be able to double down. So the only issue there would be 40% worse, competing in week number 1 under solo queue goats with diff q, outside the top 10 in points, now doubling in, bringing in Mandy for this week, electing to run under the 40% worse. I saw a lot of questions of, does that mean Mandy is back in full in, no longer a sub, but committing to a team for Pro League now that they're competing under a new name? That could happen, but hey, it's only the preseason qualifiers, right? We're almost halfway through.
I know this is something that does get brought up. We've already started to see it in teams not just like 40% worse, but also the likes of Stay Healthy. The shift regarding the pickup of these rosters is something that does begin to form here as we make our way through the likes of the preseason. I mean, Christ, remember what happened with G Dolphin last year with the qualification of VZD in the first preseason qualifier,
Yeah.
especially as those points become more dominant of an impact and these rosters become definitely the staple that they need to be to get into Pro League. You can see even more shifts as we talk about that third and fourth potential day of that preseason qualifier.
I think that's a very interesting point, because we always go through preseason qualifiers and then you get the mass roster mania that kind of happens after these. So many switch ups happen, but it's just our first foray into the competitive scene for year 4. And then we kind of get that break for holidays before the full swing of things comes back. But the fact is, we're seeing so much action only happen in the preseason qualifiers, but it's almost because we didn't really have it is a tough off season, right? Like,
Right.
we just come off champs. You have what feels like eternity, and we were just like itching for competitive nature. And so a lot of changes have happened, but it seems as if that almost bolstered a lot of excitement for the preseason qualifiers, because we didn't see a lot of these teams performing in off like tier 2 tournaments.
And I think that is something that breaks its impact, albeit slower, but still is a potential issue for a lot of rosters when we talk about kind of breaking into Pro League or even just staying competitive. I mean, there is that gap that has now formed with the separation of a lot of these teams here, and something that does make it, I would say, maybe a little bit better this time around is the fact that there is a disgusting amount of roster mania that has taken place during this offseason, especially within the EMEA region. And while I don't have the exact numbers on board right now, I guarantee you over half of the rosters that you currently see in today's preseason qualifier consist of either previous Pro League entities as recent as last year, year 3, or even further, right? And as a result here, that's providing a lot of support in ways for these teams who maybe while they don't have a lot of the time here to get the opportunity to say jump into those tier 2s, jump into those practice, or have the extra tournament or composition to make it happen, right? They still have a lot of that warranted experience. I mean, from my C on Habibi's here, Mandy off of his experience in 2023 with 40% worse, the boys in the entirety of that roster with From Nowhere here, Kumba strongest Plame team listen here being back to the 3 Muppets, right? I mean, I genuinely could sit here and the list goes on. There's probably only a handful of teams on 1 or 2 hands I can count that have none of that experience or are making their first claims here in PLQs.
I mean, look, make those first claims. I know a lot of people have been asking, hey, kind of want like a relatively unknown squad to make their way and form waves in Pro League. Yeah, exactly. No days off. Done so well in week number 1. And where things are starting to look, you always have that talk between the old guard, the new guard, but it doesn't matter because we are fostering a community of competitiveness that what I think is going to bring so much joy seeing the new names, the old names going through. And as we've got that character selection for map number 5 coming your way, it's only a matter of time before we get to see where that zone. Now, granted, map number 4 did go the ways of Barometer, which turned into that mid-game collapse where a lot of teams were vying for positioning with Passion, kind of taking that early game fight, getting that coveted back building. But what's going to happen here? Where are we going? Where are we going, Zephyr the Conjurer? Where are we going?
Like I said, I'm not here to make any impact like that today. I'll keep my conjuring behind the scenes here with my crystal balls and magic foray. But I'll tell you what, when it comes down to it, you're not going to get a zone like Barometer again, right? That is one that gives a lot of spacing to more than enough teams. And especially as you can already tell the teams are feeling this pressure here in Emea, we were walking into Zone 4 with 18 squads left standing here. That is atypical when we talk about Storm Point, especially when we start getting into a lot more of those open-ended or zones that elicit a lot more verticality in play here. You see teams eliminated at a far earlier pace, and as a result, that's why we have some of these more aggro teams find their lead when we breach a map like this.
Aggro teams as such. Zephyr's E-Kittens kicking things off from Command Center yet again. Seems as if they are inside the zone, so we might have a relatively central one for map number 5, and already boasting a solid armor selection there for the E-Kittens.
It's nice. Something that I always think is really interesting is on Storm Point, a very odd notion is, I know this is Command Center, but if you head just slightly west there to Cascades, it's almost like a 90% Zone 1 spawn rate for that central zone, which is, wow, crazy. Zone in center have most likely Zone 1 also in position. I know, what a riveting stat. But it does kind of give you some implication regarding what usually can be a very important rotation that teams need to take here in the long con. So something like Command Center, albeit central, there is a harder cut this time around towards that northern side, but they're still well and within pace.
Ooh, a little Skull Piercer longbow action for early on. I don't mind that there, especially for our lovely Zephyr's anchor, E-Kitten. We did see some early action going down in the kill feed between Hanzo and Co. And if you look over here for LVH, a down beast, the likelihood of them kind of poking and prodding towards the north, they could have evicted Red Dragon and forced them up further north, or never really know, but it is actually going to be Red Dragon. They were able to get the knock and the full onto Geo.
Yeah, taking their time there, Plushka and Prestis. Gonna have to look for some sense of a revive if they can even maybe get the recovery on that banner with 15 seconds to go. I don't think Prestis covers the gap. You had to send something out like that. Well, they are. Plushka is trying with the Revenant with tactical in hand. It'll be, no, I think that's it. 3, 2, 1. Too bad, too late, and shots already tracked out here. LVH aren't even going to give that up in its entirety. And Red Dragon now, a team going from what is just on the cusp of Pro League to now 2 for the remnants of Game 5.
Started out with a map 1 victory, and now it's Forbidden. Looking to snuff out Clemmy and hit the res onto Zodiac over here at Thunderwatch. And with a lot of these kind of northern areas still being in play for that first ring, you kind of get to see a little bit of action towards Thunderwatch. The rework that occurred over here towards Lightning Rod, Zeus Station, kind of putting Lightning Rod, the next door neighbor of Thunderwatch. You can basically shake hands with your neighbors at that point, but the E-Kittens have made their way through the command center choke towards Spiders, probably leveling up those Evos and kind of looking to solidify the position up by that Grav Cannon area, and I think that's a respectable hold. But it's Passion, who has been known to take early engagements and put themselves in viable positionings. Just in map 3, they were able to go out inside of top 3 by using positioning with 14 eliminations, Zephyr, and map 4 a win with 12. That is just, I mean, that's a nice back-to-back.
Yeah, it's something that I'd be curious to see how they make a transition and give them the opportunity to make some of those wipes happen, but we'll have to see. Something that I'll be watching more than anything is how the cave system plays into this. This is a zone that likely ends towards the eastern side of it, right? I mean, it's kind of similar to what we saw final game of Champs, if anyone remembers that specific zone, albeit differences regarding the Zeus Station and the presence of Lightning Rod now being more directly in its impact regarding sightlines. I mean, it still plays out the same. The height from above is so influential here, and a lot of teams contesting outside of Zeus, Thunder, or Lightning Rod are going to be having themselves, I mean, quite the battle to contest for what usually then becomes a very open-ended zone here, with then, of course, that one team on high pressure down.
Scum finding themselves in a tantalizing situation, put some damage out, but unfortunately just get swept on from behind. And Aussie now need to kind of bear the brunt of the force, but just cannot seem to get the positioning together. You're dabbling in and out of the doorway, but people are just pushing from all different sides in 202. Yes, they won map number 2, but they may fall here if anything is to be said, and they will, unfortunately.
It is, I mean, it is like night and day with this roster sometimes. I mean, this is what we saw from them last week as well. A team that, when in the best position, can win a game happily, right? Has the capabilities to take it toe-to-toe against some of the best rosters in the PSQs, but at the same time, drops absolute eggs. I mean, 20th through 17th positionings that, I mean, is irrecoverable when we talk about the race for points here. At least for 202, they've stayed consistent and are currently remaining in that top 10, but even in this last game, I highly doubt they can win it all, but they need to stay competitive just to keep those points high.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up that very valuable point there. The map number 1, they go out in 20th. Map number 4, they go out in 20th. Map number 3, they go out in 19th. One map where they actually make it out of the beginning game, they win. LVH need to find themselves in a good situation, but it's not going to be right here because the rats on the outskirts of things in the mill. Unfortunate for them.
My question that comes down to this is, I'd love to know the kind of decision making regarding the whys of this positioning. Yeah. Both teams know that this is a hard pull towards the northeast there, and while yes, I do understand a little bit of LVH with their presence early on against Red Dragon and maybe some kind of edge-oriented play, the Rats, I mean, arguably have a rotation. This is something we saw them do on World's Edge. They stick out on the edge, and they might have caught LVH out there just a little bit, or at least pressured them enough to, well, I mean, wipe them from this roster here. As a result, they're still well within it. They're going to be able to craft up, head towards Cedo, but it's, I don't know, it's not a strategy that I sit here and say, yeah, this is going to get them to that end game effectively. I mean, playing from edge, especially on the map like Stormpoint, especially into the north, I mean, that's about as bad as it gets.
No, especially with LVH landing down Beast, there's ring consoles at Mill, there's crafting at Mill, but you also have the ring console at down Beast, but you look towards Cedo, crafting is available there's another ring console at Checkpoint, you could have made your way, but meanwhile, Red Dragon, who initially was going up against LVH and lost out on a member, has made their way towards the wall, have prioritized rotating through because, yet again, there's another ring console with information there that is relatively unharmed should you elect to go that route. Yes, McDudes are here in the north, but a lot of these players that have made their way into Zeus are looking poised to, maybe rack up some eliminations for the teams that have not yet made it in.
Now, this is something interesting, and it's going to be a little bit of the aforementioned lack of knowledge, not just for some of these teams, but even for myself here, as when we take a look at this zone, yes, there's still presence out here towards the eastern side of this height, just outside of Overwatch, but I mean, the zone is really catering up towards Zeus now, and while we have seen in previous iterations of Stormpoint high point endings, this is a very new issue for a lot of these teams, as they're going to have to make their impacts towards what could potentially be that direct POI pull towards Zeus, which is, I mean, left marginally untested by a lot of these teams who haven't had the opportunity to play through it.
All right, well, 40% worse, kind of navigating the outskirts of the cave system here, sitting on triple purple. This needs to be a game for them, let me just tell you, because they were sitting in 4th place tied with 32 points. There's 24 points that separate them from the top of players, which is going to make this a very tough final 2 maps for them with as consistent as players and Passion have been.
Meanwhile, for the E-Kittens up above, this has been a position that they've wanted to hold out on, but choked now from both sides. They find but one, but need to go for a full send. That looks like for Anchor and IGL, both will be quickly taken out here as Habibis are absolutely in control regarding this push here. And yet you have to wonder if they were caught out, because making that rotation from command center is something that can usually be very easy to punish.
Yeah, but Habibi's here coming into this in 16th place with 8 points. It's kind of do or die for them. We were laying the stakes with the 40%. We're saying they were, 20 plus points outside of the lead, and they are inside the top 5. For teams that find themselves coming in with 8 points, they have everything to gain and nothing to lose. So you might as well start attributing all of those engagements early on.
We're going to get a better look here at some of our teams, especially on the outskirts of Lightning Rod, of all places here. Notably Forbidden and Myth, 2 teams that haven't had the best starts today in many regards, to be contesting on the edge here. Both very likely to have to make wide rotations, but something that might not come without a fight here. There's still a lot of time on the board and what looks like a lot of space, but taking for that extra 3 KP is an advantage well, you want to have.
I will take any advantage that I can get in terms of KP if I was competing, but now that I'm sitting here vibing on the desk, watching our players look to find themselves in that regular season for year 4, and Forbidden as a whole, getting that ring console information available to them, but taking your way out of this new reworked Lightning Rod into a highly inhabited Zeus station. Should be interesting, especially when you hear people underneath you.
Yeah. Pricey real estate. I don't know how much Zeus station costs, but I mean, the droves of teams, that's expensive.
Zeus wants to reclaim the namesake Zeus station.
Oh yeah, look at that. Zeus.
Zeus, is that how you pronounce it? Let me just tell you my pronunciation.
I know, I'm just messing around.
I was gonna say, bro, do not do this to me.
Yeah, that's Priestas. That is Usaka. That is Zeus. Putting a lot of us in there for all these.
Trying to say alcohol is kind of enough for me at this point, but Zen's playing that Wraith on World's Edge, Horizon on Stormpoint, just trying to thrive, but it's gonna be the Rats applying so much pressure, the Radiant transfer coming in, allowing that instant full health push, and just like that, able to eliminate alcohol, take on more points.
I was gonna say, it's a little bit of a cross there. It's not really the Rats who put down most of that pressure, it's McDudes, right? They extend Fokarn down there, they send themselves upwards with this height, and that's what makes this kind of edge play a massive question on my mind when we talk about late northern rotations, right? I know you're on the edge there, but getting up this hill out of wall and either getting through the cave are two things that are usually, and I mean aggressively punished by so many rosters.
Well, let's see where Need More Bullets is going to be able to make happen here. Linkser, Tryhard Thor, and G Dolphin able to maintain a significant space here. It's not necessarily bad. They have their back relatively cleared out. The Dark Veil is going to kind of isolate them a little bit further, but G Dolphin able to find little peaks here, trying to just catch someone, even significantly off guard.
You say catch someone, and it might be 40% worse that are looking to do so here. We talk about late rotating teams coming out of Thunder. 40% worse are going to find them, and I believe this is none other than Calm here. They take their time and make this exchange. I mean, it's still a very dangerous roster who did make it to that end game in the top 3 last time around, albeit this cross from above and the side is quick to punish out Tai Shin. It's none other than Forbidden who are the ones who put damage down here, and they'll continue to do so. Zodiac, Bochek, and Hale.
Forbidden Gaming coming in with also 8 points into the final 2 maps, really just handing it to 40% worse by just doing as much damage as they can to Calm. And now still needing to rotate a little bit more for them. Need More Bullets is actually not going to survive their positioning. Likelihood of someone challenging them for it to take that from them has happened as we turn our tides over towards Rats, over towards the boys. And even then, the third party from Rats looking to clean this up. You can see the Revenant ult on Tolkien is going to give him those shadows, that extra bit that they need.
I'll tell you what, a big peek around the side for Rats doesn't go the way they want, as Juicy is actually able to make great defense there and start to take up towards the high ground of this cave. Big problem, though, that lays in wait for all of them, as we see 40% worse eliminated by Forbidden, is the fact that teams are out there already. Teams are already in control of this exit, of this cave system. As a result, even if you are, say, the Rats, who in a dominant position come out on top, you still need to find a game plan to not only get out of the cave, but also get to Zeus Station here. They'll start to pressure Digis in hand, find a drop onto Babylon, and the boys will find themselves eliminated in 12.
Yeah, but with that ring beginning to close, time is not on their side because it is not going to be the most straightforward rotation. You have to make it out of the caves, and you know who is going to be out there, especially with Tai Shin kind of guarding that exit. Still need to push through, and even with the Radiant transfer coming in, you talk about that 2-second delay that is needed. It's not going to be in Rat's favor here, and Tolkien maybe a collective 5 HP meet their demise.
And while they get involved in a lot of the KP over towards the edge here, this is exactly what I was discussing when we talked about Rats earlier. Making these decisions to play for edge and not adapting to the circles ahead come back to bite them. 3 Dragons will be unable to get these med kits off and also face their difficulties here as we take ourselves towards the outskirts of our cave. A move in from Calm, albeit not directly necessary, is punished by Sky Nades and a black hole from behind. Damage down and likely death soon.
Look, we're gonna hit this res here, as covered as will be. No one's going to extend out here to put the pressure, aside from maybe just some rogue nades, a missile swarm in the distance as more people look to find themselves out. Team Listen is going to be the team that is looking down on Calm. You have members of Forbidden Gaming kind of spaced out on that eastern side. Abini's trying to come out of that cave system as well, but let's talk about the fact that players and Passion read this zone, took up residence where they needed to. The 2 teams at the top of the leaderboard, if someone does not evict them now, this could be one of those 2 taking home a spot in Pro League.
They've got one more game to decide it as well here, but I'm glad to see them keeping competitive within our top 8 and likely top 5 as well here, as we'll see the end of Calm on this rotation here. Now down, while they do have quite a bit of resources to spare still here, it is not an answer. Right? I mean, they've got 1 Dark Veil, but the minute they make their way outside of this rock, even if they aren't directly eliminated from, say, something like this rotation, getting over to the other side is something that will be punished here. Team Listen dropping the mobile shield down, will defend for seconds more here as the rotation comes through,
Okay.
but look at that beam
Okay, Kumbra, that's what we need to see from you, but this is the biggest issue about the Watson Newcastle. Is when teams cover that distance and try to put pressure on the wall, but Kumbra is just answering every bit of that nature when people are pushing onto them. So this is a solid showing for them, but Forbidden Gaming Zodiac, the biggest question for me is, I understand that you've gotten smoked out so you can retrieve back to your teammates, but that space that you're holding could be a big one.
I'll tell you what, for Forbidden, they're going to be able to rotate back in there. Sadly for Habibi, as they lose out on Myci in the meanwhile. Now looking across the open space between Art and TTX here. They've got a building ahead, held by the likes, I believe, of Passion, but making that cross is something that is quickly taken advantage of. Satisfaction from above with the 30-30 leaves Art as the solo remaining member.
Yeah, if I'm Art at this point, I just want to live, but they're not going to let you. Passion need as many points as they can get if they want to take that top spot away from players. Meanwhile, McDudes will fall as well, which means we do have Passion and players still alive in this second to last match.
Players here, meanwhile, have made the crossover on the opposite side and look to take this toe-to-toe up against Myth here. A knock drop onto Reaper thus far starts it off successfully with a shield swap on the back end. A 2v3 situation, even though their health is looking low for players. They're still at a massive advantage here, even if eclipsing past that energy barricade makes this a slower fight at the hand here. Round 6 closing, a nice crack from the far side as Passion on the outskirts find the wipe on Forbidden. Passion are now the only team outside.
Now we bide our time as the final ring collapses, pushing our teams together. Passion has found themselves in yet another nice situation to that barometer zone that we witnessed for them, but we just have to bide our time and push towards Myth, and honestly, Myth's gonna get sandwiched here.
Yeah, Myth, pressured from both sides, might find themselves a happy home in that building. Meanwhile, though, I love this from Passion, trying to take and clear out additional space here so they don't give up. It is going to be countered back by that Rolling Thunder, and this should be the opportunity for, yes, players to move outside and create their opportunity. But the fact of the matter is they take it toe-to-toe to Myth. They want to compete for second above all else, and I don't even know if they're going to be able to do that. They get wiped out. Myth as a solo member is eliminated, and Passion win it again.
More passion, more energy, more footwork. No, I can't do that
enough.
again. It is enough. Look, I'm telling you, we asked for more, we got it. No, that TikTok sound gets completely engrossed in my mind, but it is so fitting here. Back-to-back wins of double-digit potential eliminations. They took 14 eliminations in map 3. If this isn't enough to move them to the top of the leaderboard, then I don't know what is, because it is coming down to Passion and players. It is their week.
But that's the thing. That's the problem we still have on the board there. Players, albeit they didn't actually get to compete and make it to second, getting wiped out in tow by Passion and Myth there, they still were in third. The question remains, though, I know for a fact that Passion were very present in double fights there in the end, and they got the win, which comes alongside the wipe on Myth and players here. It's likely that they have now overtaken players.
Well, I guess we just need to pull up the standings so we can witness if it happened or not, because there is only one other map after this, and Passion unseats players by 7 points before we move into that final map. But it's Red Dragon, who, granted, they did get 25 points off map number 1, but it has been a rather lackluster string of events throughout these final games. It would be pretty monumental of them to throw down a north of 35-point game to unseat Passion, but anything can happen. At this point, if you find yourself out of a viable spot to unseat Passioner players, work on just your game for the final 6th map, because you just need to get those coveted points, right, Zephyr?
That's right. And I'll tell you what, when it comes down to it, this comes down to the race between players and Passion at this point. I mean, Red Dragon, the next closest, is 35 points behind. And I'll be honest, I've never seen a team eclipse 35 points in a game. I have literally never seen a team eclipse 35, right? And so at this point, it comes down to 2 teams, the likes of Passion, a roster filled with pro league experience, 0-0, Denze, YQ, or players. Guys like Fit2 coming back into the fray here after years alongside major pushers, Jukes, and Kazakh. Finally, in his first iteration away from the original 7-8-9 roster. One of these two teams will be going to Pro League after our break.
Welcome back to the Apex Legends Global Series preseason qualifier 2. I'm Tiffany, that's Zephyr, and Zephyr's about to lay down the law for what is going to happen between this players and passion showdown in the final map.
At the end of the day, this is the final two that stand above the rest. Let's pull up that scoreboard just so you can see exactly how dominantly they stand there, because it is a 35-point gap between the next nearest Red Dragon and Pashes. And I'll tell you what, that bar only raises as we make our way through our final game of the day here. Tiffany, players and passions are in a two-horse race for Pro League.
Yeah, they definitely are. And I was spamming you with messages in between. I was like, who is it? Who is going to win, Zephyr? Which one will it be? And what did you tell me? Tell me.
You know what I actually said? I said, well, if one of them gets wiped out early, it's GG. That's what I said. So honestly, we need to see basically a repeat of this last game, right? It came down to the fact that both players in Passion were making smart decisions, and more importantly, they were present to elicit what could be their fate in these end game circles. It is crazy that players weren't able to get that extra, I would say, 2 points that would put them at 70 if they get to second place, but still, a 7-point difference is more than easy enough to eclipse, especially if one of these squads face difficulties.
Yeah, it's been quite interesting to see Passion's kind of string of events throughout our 6-map series today. You know, they only were able to just break inside the top 10 on map number 1 with 4 eliminations. No eliminations for map number 2, and went out relatively early, but it's been that journey since map 3 that has really thrown them into the mix of things. A 3rd place with 14 eliminations, that wins in map 4 and map 5, really stapling it. So you're like, well, yeah, you know, Ashen just needs to do what they did last map. Well, it's honestly the last 3 maps because they went back to back. So if I'm players who have been relatively consistent with a slew of top 3 placements, you just got to play your game. And it might come down to the final circle yet again for these two. But only time will tell. And we are just moments away from that final map. And I have no idea what to
Yeah.
think.
I mean, we leave it up to the likes of Storm Point here. I'll tell you what, though, when we talk about some of these other teams that have made their way through, we go back to the concept of a lot of repeat offenders as we break our way down the leaderboard here. The folks like Red Dragon, Stay Healthy, and even the pieces of 40% worse are here once again. One of the few, if not the only team that has managed to make their top 10 impact here today is Team Listen. Kumbra, Strongest, Plame, the only squad to be their first appearance in preseason qualifiers and the one to put up points that actually count here. And that's important because when we talk about Team Listen previously, they finished with 510 points in 41st through 44th.
Ooh. Yeah, if you're sitting in 6th on the leaderboard, that's a nice 1,320 points, which if you look up the shakeup things, the 5th place right now coming into this was 1,350. So if you can just stay consistently towards that top 5 throughout the rest of the weeks, I am not that good at math, but my odds say I hope it turns out for you. Like, okay, you
It,
know.
it will be difficult here, and it does come down to a lot of the shifting nature of these last two preseason qualifiers. Because the truth is, I mean, especially when we talk about points based qualification, overall points based qualification, it is going to be very hard to compete with any roster that manages to make it to all 4 finals. And unlike previous years where we only see one or two, I mean, I literally just told you only one new squad has managed to actually make it into the top 10. The rest of these teams have been here before and are continuing to put up, point scores that will put them upwards of 2,600, 2,700, or
Yeah.
even more as we walk into our halfway point of the preseason qualifiers.
And it's interesting then when you start kind of having some roster swaps throughout the preseason qualifiers, those
Right.
points kind of get attributed to the players themselves. So roster changes can happen, but granted, it's the staying consistent. And with that being said, and Emea, you're right, 12 teams making the finals lobby yet again for the second week. So with only 2 more preseason qualifiers to go after this, it's almost tough for yourself if you find yourself outside the top 10 points right now.
Hey, at the end of the day, though, the only thing you can do is your best because we never know how that third
True.
or fourth week is going to shake out with these teams potentially not making it, right? So if you are consistently, even if you missed out on that first week, like say, Zephyr's E-Kittens still walked away with a 13th position in semifinals, which gets them at least, I believe, somewhere around 780 points. That's enough to stay competitive if these other teams start to fall, albeit on a day like today, need to be doing a little bit better than 20th, right? Still, though, I will say, very impressed with a lot of these rosters. The two that I like the most, though, in terms of our narrative is Stay Healthy and 40% Worst. And we've talked our ear off about Mandy, but a huge shout out to Stay Healthy today. They come out of last week in third overall here, right? And that's a team that was playing alongside what felt like a pretty much guaranteed secured roster already right off the bat, with of course the likes of Masuko here and differently though, Atnam, right? A previous member of the Challenger circuit. They make a major change. They bring in Thawne here, another previous Challenger Circuit major winner, alongside that Infinite roster. And what usually is a question of, okay, can we win this? How does this third mesh out? Is answered here, right? And they are still in fourth place with the current position to potentially get third again here and be in that spot to maybe walk away with one of those top 4 pro league conditions.
They may just kind of take the lead on the preseason qualifier points as a whole because they are currently outplacing LVH, who had that threshold already just by 30 points. But as we roll through character select for our final map of the day, I'd like you in chat to learn some things from your Apex life coach, Zephyr. We learned in a previous map that you should always be present in your games and in your life. And for the newest thing that I've learned from the coach, it would be do your best. just mere moments ago. Life
I am
coach
a
Zephyr.
Hallmark coach at best.
Hey, you know what? As long as your Texas A&M and your Zephyr Kittens are picking up points, that's all that matters, right?
They're not my team. They're not my team.
I mean, your name is in there.
They're not my team though. I will say it is kind of funny. I feel like like speaking of Christmas, it's kind of like the concept of those Hallmark movies where you've got the, independent businesswoman, no nonsense, no time for Christmas, come home to the little league tree farming, no house coach who teaches her the meaning of Christmas and what it means to, you know, be a part. Hallmark movies. That's what I feel like right now.
You feel like a Hallmark movie?
Yeah.
You know what?
At least you're making me feel like one. You are.
Look, if that is the vibes that you get from me, let's go. But Habibis,
Oh, okay.
finding some early action. It's probably against your kittens because we were over here towards not near command center. This is the
No, my
wall.
kitties.
Crazy. Your Hallmark movie has me so confused.
That's okay.
It's okay. You know what they did? They landed on players. Did they?
Might have been. Yeah.
Did they?
If this is the follow through off of that grav cannon, and we're talking about, I mean, it looks very similar here. Players might not have actually gotten the opportunity to live, which is kind of crazy because at the end of the day, I mean, anything goes, right? I mean,
That is true.
I know some teams like hate it when they're like, how dare you drop on us and try to like wipe us out. But realistically speaking, there is no rule about griefing starts. Like, if you don't want to see players in Pro League and you want passion in there instead because you think of some advantage, right? Maybe in the future weeks of preseason qualifiers or even Pro League itself, do it. What is stopping you other than your morals and general love in the EMEA region as you are now blacklisted?
Well, then it turns this preseason qualifier into less of a Hallmark movie and something akin to House of Dragon. An eye for an eye.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. They've made their way out. We're building up a lot of hype, and I'll tell you what. The only thing they truly missed out on here, though, is loot. Right? They don't get a lot of the presence out there towards the side of something like that wall area, and as a result, will have to compete more directly into zone to find themselves potentially a happy setup here. But this isn't a team who really bides their time and loots out in a long term. I mean, they get to zone. They want to play for an end game, and they've, already made their impacts. Here in Cedo Station, though, Passion is more than happy to take their time and get themselves set up a best.
And that's something that Passion has been able to do. They look for those early game positions that will just take them through the end game. Their macro and their zone predictability here on Stormpoint has been so effective for them, and you can see essentially where they're going to be positioning themselves as we've got the map on the right-hand side, and it's a bean potential ending, so you can see where they're trying to navigate and take up space.
This can be a really hard one to play out here as creating space and surviving and making your impact out from these buildings in this endgame is, well, yes, dependent on pull, but ultimately can be really, dependent on how these teams tend to play out and position themselves, because you'll get the IMC Armory hold, you'll get the double building spread in the bean itself here, but there's always someone who takes the outskirts, creates that space, and manages to get themselves in that end game winning position here. You're going to see Catalyst make its impacts, right? And a team like Passion who has that on board on 0-0, that is going to be the make or break in this final zone. That gives them that opportunity to win.
As we kind of take our lay of the land, we have a team occupying kind of God Rock over here, overlooking. But as our teams make our way, we do see a rotation coming in from 40% worse. I don't mind the Trident move for Made in Heaven up here, trying to find some kind of cover, because when you take spaces like this early on, a lot of teams will be looking at you. But 202 Esports trying to find themselves out of that very early game as they take down Myth Esports.
There you go. That's a response that we needed to see here from 202, especially after being pushed so far out above what was originally a team winning on today, now in 9th overall with 25 points here. Technically, the distance between them and that 40th third place is, well, if you can do math, unlike many out there, 15 points.
I can't do math. Thank you, Zephyr, for doing the math for me.
You're
Lo and
welcome.
behold, you're not just a weatherman, you're not an Apex life coach or coach and a caster, but you're just also a math doer.
Weathermen have to do math.
Weatherman? Do they?
Yes! Oh my god.
You don't just stand in front of a green screen and
Nope,
point to the
okay.
oncoming storm
You're like
systems and you
everybody
just...
else. You disgust me. It's a STEM major. Do people
sure.
realize that I'm in like a
No.
STEM major? I do science.
I thought it'd be like
and
a broadcast
mathematics.
major.
No, it's not. It's not even close.
Okay.
I know so much about clouds.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, tell me more.
I don't see a cloud.
There are
Sorry.
no clouds here,
There are no
alright?
clouds.
Just the boys making their way through.
Either way, we'll jump on over to my E-Kittens here as they themselves are in a one situation. Hey!
Okay,
The Zenny point blank with the Kraber will bring it to a 1v1. It is up to none other than Angie to pull it off in the end behind the knockdown shield. She's gonna have to make it count here, but from the other side, Red Dragon find the wipe on them in 19th, and for Prestis, I'm surprised he's allowed to escape towards this choke. There it is. 086 on the chase.
Yeah, this is gonna be unfortunate for the remaining Red Dragon player. Evac Tower coming out, not gonna be able to take it though because OB6 is gonna be waiting to be able to cut them down. But some good action there. Still, numbers are not going to be in the favor, but this man is just bouncing throughout this choke, but able to get him will be Azak with a 30-30. Chalk it up. One more point for the players.
And here's the thing, that is so important right now for players, but it brings a lot of questions regarding rotational support for this team. Kills are great, and getting them is going to start to close that gap between them and Passion, but if you're not playing for endgame, that is done and dusted in terms of your success here. Speaking of the Rats, they love the edge. They love burning, they love ticking, and they continue to play out here so far and below our zone.
All I could think about when you said, speaking of the Rats, they love edge, like, I cast a hide and seek tournament with Dandro as we look through this, and he made an epic Shadow Wizard money game reference. He's like, they love casting spells, and this is what my brain does, Zephyr, when you talk to me. It just goes out of my mind. But as we get a good look at where that ring is still pulling towards the bean, think of the rotations that we're going to be witnessing. Bacalal and Forbidden will likely run into each other through one of these chokes. Players still very much on that further northernmost side. And Passion has found themselves in the beam.
It's something that will give them the opportunity to compete for a top 5 position. And now, I mean, it really is in players' hands to make a good transition themselves. For LVH, we saw them start out in mill last time around in what was going to be their wipe as they got taken out by Rats. This time around, Rats, nowhere to be seen, have opted to play deeper into zone. And for LVH, have a mill position, albeit getting into that millage or green zone is a wide cross, especially when you have teams holding things like Godrock or this entire hillside here. So potentially the utilization of that Dark Veil may be imminent here, or maybe a more direct fight.
I don't hate where LVH is occupying. They've got the next ring information. They don't really have too much pressure to move out of here just yet because they have plenty of time, and trying to anchor this space and maybe clear out the northern side behind them would not be so bad. But regardless, yes, they're inside the top 10. They're going to be or just outside after the final map with a tied with 12th place with McDudes. But they still had so many points after week 1 preseason qualifier. It's going to be looking relatively healthy for them overall.
I like this from LVH. It's not directly into zone just yet. They know they need the points to catch on back up, even if they get to this end game. So the fight to potentially ensue. Got Arcstar on that door there. Gotta be careful on this window, but hey, Jay Hanzo's already thinking about it with that crack there. Clifton and Crew starting to close the gap as another drop found. Jay Hanzo with that Radiant transfer brought back into it. And for 3 Dragons, we say sayonara as they're now probably knocked out of the top 10.
So long as the Conduit elects to anchor or refrag for the team, throwing that Radiant transfer so well timed makes that engagement for the opposing squad just kind of shambles when you're finding yourselves inside a building and the repeat offenders keep coming through, but Cinetic finding a relatively free 30-30 shots onto the team under the bridge, looking like trolls.
And the saddest thing here is it's not going to be followed up upon, given the fact that they want to house themselves upon Godrock, right? And they know how great the control is there from Beam. But hey, even pulling away some of those resources, if it extends just Cinetic, and of course now what will likely be the exchange on that grav lift, that's enough. I mean, hey, you get the job done. You pop on back up here, quick reload, and you might not stop what's directly below you, but hey, everyone else, you've got a nice longbow to pop off.
Ooh, and it's going to be Calm that was on the receiving end of those shots. Sheen here as well. Does have a Rolling Thunder and one smoke to boot, but we'll have to kind of focus on where they want to position themselves as we move over kind of towards that millage area. Let's see what we find here. Yeah, I mean, honestly, for them, if they're not going to get capitalized upon for the team that is occupying Godrock, it's tough, right? Because no matter where they move from here, they're going to be looked down upon.
It is something that can sometimes work, though, if that zone does cater more towards that western side. Godrock will usually elicit a nice advantage on top of you off of that drop, but it survives a little bit longer than most teams kind of, or most people would probably think there, because the angles aren't exactly perfect. But yeah, this is the big question mark right now. Players, we talk about late rotations from the north. We talk about their early game being punished out here, and now getting into this zone is, I mean, likely a very impossible situation. LVH haven't made any moves, and they themselves are going to be pressuring back and are more than capable to truly do so.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, LVH can end the auto qual potential of players right here and now. They are in control. They have space, and Passion has already found themselves inside of Millage.
Well, out here towards the side, Kazakh is just barely able to foot their way in here as they stick the bat out. This fight against LVH is crucial. Noticeably, though, Vaves is incredibly separated out. I know playing a little bit more of that support-based role is important as that Rolling Thunder comes down. A trying evac would be, I mean, immediately punished here, as we can see the shots already ringing through. LVH will definitely take advantages. They don't make it to the top here, but I love this. They're already off the back end rotation, playing for Mill, setting themselves up for the far wayward side over towards God.
No, this is their best chance right now. This is the last stand we had seen from Vibes himself, but he had moved up to join up with Hanzo and Liffin. Now they're still trying to cut off players, but the Dark Veil has already been expended, and LVH is not going to let them go.
Players here, they don't even want to deal with this already with a fast rotation out here of the Mill. Still need to find themselves a happy home, and thankfully we know for a fact that even though Godrock is in major control, a lot of the underside is still available for play. So against it all, after being choked out, even facing Nox on the outskirts of zone, players have made it.
Look, that is something to be said. Now LVH rotating in with a Dark Veil of their own, kind of on the opposite side. It's going to be a rather tough road for players here coming into this with just 7 points separating them in second place, with Passion leading the charge. So they do have to rotate, and they do need to find as many eliminations as possible if they want to take down Passion. But LVH, they are looking for as many preseason qualifier points as they can gather here.
LVH, with the coverage of that Dark Veil, is allowed to survive further as the boys will be eliminated, taking us past our top 15 here. Just above this rock, this is a good place from height to work into, but they still haven't found themselves a direction into the map just yet here.
40% worse has fallen. They were inside the top 5. Will they be able to remain, stay healthy, and Calm will join them? A lot of mid-game aggression here in the final match, and now we're into the top 10. Notable teams that are still in: Players and Passion and LVH, despite all odds with those early engagements with players, have made their way just a little bit further.
Well, for LVH, they'll get some recovery here in the minor moments, but at the end of the day, 30 seconds to go. They've got to either take a fight here or find some slide onto the low ground. You can see them pinging for access, and I'll tell you what, if there's any squad that can clean house here in the time that remains, it's LVH, but they're not pulling the trigger.
It's tough, right? Because you still have to focus on the fact that, yes, we need to take out this team towards our left to give us an opening chance to rotate further in. But you've got teams already so deep. You can see exactly where passion lies and players on the left-hand side. The team that is occupying Godrock will make things a lot tougher here. That's going to be Made in Heaven occupying a lot of space. And, well, players not too bad. They can just kind of rotate just a little more south to where that ring is going to go, but Rats look to make that early play for it.
Well, mass exodus, we talk about it a lot here. Most of the being no longer in play. The Passion, the only roster that can test a spot on the very edge of it, and this will be the true test for them here. Can they keep control of this building with more than 4 squads making their way inside?
Well, here come the Rolling Thunders in answer. Denze able to grab that knock onto Liffin, so LVH will be finding themselves in a relatively situation here. Need more bullets, McDudes 202. LVH have fallen, and Passion grabs 3 well-needed KP to furthermore that point disparity between players. There was 7 between them when we came into the final map of the day, so players has their work cut out for them, and it starts by walking up onto Made in Heaven.
Players here need to take this fight successfully if they're going to be coming into Pro League, but they miss out on a perfect black hole. Still though, from below, Satisfaction with the Digi-Sight finds the cracks that count here. From behind the rock, still looking for this advantage. In between that Dark Veil, they'll pop on through the other side, and they've lost out on what seems to be this impact. Could potentially be now another team from below getting involved here, and it's none other than Passion from the other side. They will be the holders of their own fate here as they take away Godrock. A Kraber from Denze seals the deal as they get to go on to Pro League.
Look, if it's going to be a Kraber that deals the final blow to players and really solidifies your positioning on top of Godrock, I could not write a better script for this preseason qualifier. Passion exuding from the squad in a rather dominating fashion, and now they just need to close out this game.
Oh my gosh, here. Passion have set themselves up for their win, for their position in Pro League again. Whether it's EQ from previous Vortex, Denze from massive rosters, but most notably Team Nightmare recently, or 0-0 on Passion themselves here. It's a team with warranted experience who get to do it all over again, even if the remnants of this match are but a victory lap.
Look, if they go to close this out and win it, that will be 3 wins for 3 Storm Point matches and a Pro League position. It doesn't really get much better than that performance for a preseason qualifier.
Still, on the outside here, 3 squads remaining. Rats on one end, as well as what looks like Cinetic and Crew here. They've got a lot of space to work with, especially with 0-0 playing the backside, but they need to find some way to force Cinetic over to take this fight against the Rats. That's the only way Passion walk out with the win, but I'll tell you what, with the threat of a Kraber in hand, it's definitely something that forces moves from Made in Heaven. The wall is down. They've split the fight. Rolling Thunder as well here. Double knocks as they'll be eliminated, and now they have to turn immediately and fight the Rats.
This is going to be a really good game for the Rats. It's well needed. Coming into the final map of the day with 15 points. These are preseason qualifier points as we can shoot up the leaderboard and take charge for them. But it's Passion who want to end this in a dominating fashion. Kraber in hand, that no-scope not necessarily going to connect for you, but that one will. Hopefully, the point-blank action. Passion and Rats doing a little bit of dance here in the endgame.
Denze there, no shield swaps available, but a quick wraparound seals the 3rd win in a row for Passion. And as we've said it again, the obvious spot in Pro League.
Pretty crazy, honestly. There's a lot of talented teams. When we talk about these rosters at the start of the broadcast, Zephyr, it was any one of them that could have pulled together a monumental performance that really solidified their spot, but it was Passion that just really took it up another notch. So congratulations to them. 3 back-to-back
Wow.
wins. That's pretty insane.
It is it is something that almost felt like it came out of nowhere today from Passion. We knew they were capable, but especially after watching their performance in at least the first 3 matches of World's Edge, no one was expecting the triple repeat win here for them to stand above the rest. And the best part about that last game too is we talk about players, the passion, the fight. We get into the top 5 and both teams are still in it. And as players are looking to take that fight, Passion says, no, not today. You're not going to take away our coveted chance to stand above the rest.
And stand above the rest they did. And we can harp on it all day. The dominating performance. We're going to see the tweets hit the timeline saying we are back in Pro League. I'm sure we've got a beautiful screen to congratulate our winners from Passion, because that's what we need to see today. Back into the fray of things, back into Pro League. Congratulations.
It's to no surprise to any. Our winners, Passion. It's crazy because we don't even get to really discuss it because they stand so far above the rest of these teams here that the winner was declared well in before we even got to this position. A major win for them. They'll join alongside No Days Off as the second team to represent from Emea. Let's take a look at that leaderboard. I want to see how big that gap actually was at the end here.
Oh, wow. I mean, it was quite large. Just shy of 100 points there for Passion, and players ending with that 73 points. That means a 5-point game for them in map 6. Red Dragon rounding out the top 3, but that's where you have to start thinking about those preseason qualifier points that we've kind of been talking about, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what a lot of our teams, if you're not taking that first place on the leaderboard, that auto qual spot, because there are 4 preseason qualifiers, which means 4 teams will auto qualify and 4 teams will advance with those preseason qualifier points. And honestly, second place on the day gets you 1,440 split amongst players.
I'll tell you what, for players, it might not be that Pro League spot, but like you said, it is going to be something that keeps them super competitive here after they placed 8th last week here. The same can be said for a lot of squads as that gap absolutely balloons. 56 points down from first. Red Dragon there just behind them will be very happy with third after 14th last week. A huge shout out to Team Listen and Forbidden though. 2 new rosters that make it to finals today that managed to eclipse the top 10 here, especially Team Listen. Kumbra, Strongest, Plame, 3 Muppets, and their representation in Pro League in the past is still something that is alive and well in one of the oldest EMEA rosters, even if they only finished there in 4th with 39.
But regardless, to all our teams that have competed throughout week 2 of the preseason qualifiers, congratulations. And hopefully we do have a nice accumulation of those coveted points that we need. We hopefully will get to see you next week, because that's right, guys. Stay tuned. Next week, we'll have more Emea action as we turn our tides towards that latter half of the preseason qualifiers. But for those of you that are still interested in some more Emea action, that's next week. North America will be coming up later today as we jump into that. I don't know, Zephyr, I think I've got Dia with me if I'm not mistaken. So any final words from the Emea region for you today?
There's nothing but love for our folks out here in Emea. I appreciate all of you coming once again to support not just us over here on Versus, but also all of the watch parties and anyone else who is representing for the start of year 4. I know we talked about it a little bit, Tiff, but I know I can feel it in my heart. It's going to be a good one for the ALGS.
It's going to be a good one, and only time will tell. We just have to get through the rest of our preseason qualifiers, so go hydrate, go get your lift, and do whatever you have to do, because North America will be back in just a few hours, and we hope to see you there.